Story 1.
I caught my fiancé cheating through our neighbor's window, right in the middle of the act with him. The night seemed quiet, or at least that's what I thought. My fiancé lay next to me snoring, but as I woke up, something felt off. She wasn't there. I peeked out the window and noticed a light in our neighbor's house. Shockingly, I saw her in the arms of our friend, closely connected. I was furious. Without hesitation, I hurried towards them. Their expressions were priceless as they saw me coming. My fiancée knelt, her face filled with agony, begging for forgiveness. However, forgiving her was the last thing on my mind. We've been together for 5 years. She's 43, and I'm 47. I was eager to marry her and even splurged on a $9,530 engagement ring, planning to propose this Christmas. Unfortunately, my plans took a sudden turn when I caught her cheating on me. Not much of a drinker, I declined my next-door neighbor's invite to a small fire pit party, choosing to go to bed early because of work at 5 a.m. on Monday. That night, I went to bed early, feeling a bit tired. A few hours later, I woke up to find my girlfriend missing. Assuming she was still at the neighbor's party, I walked to the second bedroom upstairs, which has a window facing the backyard. What I saw there was shocking. From my window, I had a clear view of my neighbor's yard, and only 3 people remained: my neighbor, her brother, and my girlfriend. It was around midnight, and my girlfriend was sitting next to the neighbor's brother. My neighbor started walking towards her house, and my girlfriend pulled her chair closer to the neighbor's brother. I watched in horror as she initiated an intimate session with him. Despite my disbelief, I chose not to confront them immediately. Returning to my bedroom, I grabbed my phone, hoping to capture evidence of their betrayal. However, as soon as I opened the camera app, they stopped kissing, and my neighbor came back outside. I managed to take some pictures, but they weren't clear enough. Once my neighbor went back inside, my girlfriend and the neighbor's brother resumed kissing. I was stunned, realizing I happened to be in the right place at the right time, but how long had this been going on? I couldn't comprehend it. I immediately called her cell phone, watching as she checked it and looked towards our house. It was too dark for her to see me in the dim room staring at her. She ignored my call, returning to flirting and touching the other guy. I was so furious I wanted to run downstairs and confront them, but I was frozen in shock and couldn't move. After a few minutes, they put out the fire, and my girlfriend said goodbye to the guy before walking back to our house through the fence gate. I heard her open the front door and stumble up the stairs, so I waited for her at the top of the staircase. She was surprised to see me awake, assuming I was asleep. She was obviously tipsy but still in control. I asked where she had been, and she claimed she was still at the party. Then I revealed that I had caught her kissing the neighbor's brother, and she tried to deny it, but I told her I had seen it with my own eyes and even had photographic proof. She started to cry, saying it was just a mistake and that she was drunk. I lacked the energy to argue with her that night, so I simply suggested she sleep in the other bedroom. However, I couldn't help but question how long this had been happening. It felt like I had uncovered a hidden world of hers, and I wasn't sure if there was more to it than just one kiss. That night was sleepless. I lay there staring at the ceiling, struggling to accept that my girlfriend had cheated on me not once, but twice. Initially, she cheated on her ex-husband with one of his friends for 4 years, and now she was pursuing the neighbor's brother. Looking back, I should have seen it. Becoming a cheater tends to remain a cheater. As the saying goes, a leopard can't change its spots. I was thankful I discovered this before marrying her, and though she apologized profusely the next morning, it was too little, too late. The guy she cheated on me with was 38, and I happened to have his phone number. I messaged him, informing him that I saw him kissing my girlfriend. His response was cold, stating that trust had been broken and we should go our separate ways. It was difficult to argue with that, but I remained furious. I called him names and threatened him. Considering my background in bodybuilding, I'm confident he's afraid to show his face around here again. What stings even more is that I thought he was a decent guy. However, when she made a move on him, he backed away and let her do as she pleased. I pointed out that she initiated the kiss, and that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't come on to him. Regardless, there's no turning back, and I'm ending this relationship. Fortunately, we have no financial ties or children together, allowing me to walk away relatively unscathed. But my heart is broken, and I can't help but wonder if they're still involved once I leave her. I'll make sure to inform all her friends and family about her actions, especially mentioning the ring I had bought for her that she'll never get to wear. The thing is, my girlfriend doesn't drink much, only about 3 times a month, and rarely gets drunk. I didn't mention the engagement ring I bought, and I plan to return it now. She expresses remorse and professes her love, but when I reflect on that night, I question how she could love me. Then she claims not to remember kissing the other guy, but it still hurts that she made the first move. I don't drink, so I witnessed everything and have blurry evidence on my camera confirming what I saw. She's no longer denying it and admits that it happened. Now, I'm not as hurt as before, but I sense myself becoming more resentful, distant, and somewhat mean. She keeps expressing a desire for us to get back together, but I can't shake the feeling that I failed as a man by allowing the woman I love to cheat on Minot once, but twice. I informed her that I'll leave her if she still wants the other guy, but she insists she doesn't and urges me to stop worrying about it. However, every time he's around, as he's the brother of our neighbor, I can't help but feel paranoid, wondering if she'd rather be with him. She suggested selling the house and moving away from the neighborhood, thinking that I'll always be reminded of that terrible night whenever he shows up. I haven't shared with my friends about being cheated on because admitting it is embarrassing. On another note, I'm a bit scared of what lies ahead. Finding a new place and being alone is intimidating, but I must ask myself, do I want to keep living in resentment, anger, and uncertainty, or face my fear of change knowing it will pass? Our current house is in her name, and it's only been years since we moved in. However, she can't afford the mortgage without me. She knows it and is scared. As for the guy she cheated with, he won't be moving here. He has his own house now and knows she's a cheater. I have to put on a brave face and pretend everything is normal, but inside, I'm seething with anger. How could she think I'm okay with what happened? When I asked her if the roles were reversed, would she leave me? She instantly said yes. The good news is leaving without financial ties or emotional baggage. She'll be crushed when I leave, but it's her decision. She threw away 5 years for a mere kiss with a younger, attractive guy. And now she faces the consequences. Honestly, I'm 90% sure I'll leave her. It's hard for me to look her in the face, and I don't believe her "I love you" anymore. She can be the neighborhood flirt for all I care, and that's probably all I'll use her for until I leave. That guy knew we were in a committed relationship. He's no better than my cheating ex-girlfriend. She'll be crushed when I pack my bags and walk out the door. I'll make sure all her friends and our neighbors know exactly what kind of person she is. But sometimes, I wonder if my lack of affection and not drinking were partly to blame. Even if that's true, it doesn't excuse her sneaking around behind my back. It was a clear case of seeking attention she thought I wasn't giving her. 2 weeks later, I'm in full-on moving mode, trying to get away from my cheating ex-girlfriend. She's still trying to act like everything is cool between us, but I know better. The sooner I can get out of this house and away from her, the better. I heard that the neighbor was throwing another party, and everyone was there except for the other man who kissed my girl. I haven't seen him since that fateful night, and it's getting harder and harder to hold my tongue and not bring it up to her. It was humiliating, but I already told the neighbors at the party about her infidelity. They now know to keep their eyes on their men around her. She won't stay in this neighborhood after I leave, and the shame of being caught and the fact that she can't afford the mortgage without me will drive her out. It's all her own doing. I just hope that kiss was worth losing me and her new house, because it's going to haunt her for a long time. In a week's time, I plan to pretend everything is fine with my girlfriend, but then I'll disappear without a trace, leaving a massive explanation of how she betrayed me and the fact that I had a ring waiting for her on Christmas. It's a good thing I found out about her cheating before we tied the knot, or things would have been way worse for me. I'm still haunted by the whole ordeal, and it happened 3 weeks ago. I went around to all the neighbors and spilled the beans about her infidelity. Some even mentioned she was flirting with the other guy before getting drunk. They promised not to tell her anything. She has a history of cheating and was in past relationships too. Her ex-husband was left in shambles after their divorce settlement. She used that money to make a down payment on our current house. Now, he's a mess and has been single for almost a decade. It's sickening that she stooped so low as to go after his friend. I don't know what I was thinking when I got involved with her. Leaving without saying anything might be the best course of action, but I can't help but feel that telling her about the engagement ring I had planned to give her would be a satisfying twist of the knife. The neighbors threw another party last night, and guess who showed up? The other man. I suggested my girlfriend join his party, but she got defensive, thinking I wanted to push her away. She refused to drink there anymore, but I suspected he texted her. When I asked, she got angry and denied it. The other man had a new girlfriend that night, but it was too dark to see if she was a neighbor or someone new. If he started dating her after making out with my girlfriend, I would have exposed what happened on Labor Day. When she wasn't around, I thought about confronting him, but I didn't want to end up in jail for roughing him up. Do I think it was the only time they kissed? I have doubts, but I'm not sure. As for closeness, I'm sure it didn't happen. I know her daily routine well, and there's no way it could have occurred, although I could be wrong. While looking for a new place, I couldn't find anything suitable. It bothers me that none of our neighbors has ever told me about her flirting with that guy. It makes me wonder if they're all hiding something. I know it sounds wrong, but I couldn't resist checking her phone. It felt like I was treating her like a teenager. She deleted his number, a red flag to me. She claims she's done partying there, but I bet as soon as I'm out, she'll be right back. It doesn't matter, though. The thought of her being with that guy will always haunt me. Some think she's keeping me around for the house, but I've known her for years, and I believe she truly regrets what she did. That being said, I'm not going to let her off the hook. She's going to feel the pain when I leave, and it won't just be about losing the house. She knows she messed up big time. I've been sleeping in a separate room and keeping my distance since the affair. As I broke the news that she had to sell the house, eventually I saw tears rolling down her cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the pain I had to bear. She finally realized that my heart was closed off to her forever. She even suggested that we sell the house to start anew, but what's the point? Infidelity can happen anywhere, and I don't want to waste my time and energy on something that will never work. I hate going back to our house in the neighborhood. It reminds me of the betrayal that took place. When she asked me why I felt that way, I didn't hold back and told her that it was the place where she cheated on me. People have been asking why she had the other man's number saved in her phone, and the answer is simple: he's just the brother of a neighbor. They needed to communicate for business purposes, but it's still unclear how long they've been talking to each other outside of that. As it turns out, the other man isn't a neighbor. He just crashes parties with his brother and sister-in-law. As for how he got my girlfriend's number, well, she and I run a side business refinishing and painting furniture, and he had asked us to work on a dresser. Of course, we needed his number to let him know when it was finished. I'm not sure how long it took for them to start communicating after he picked up his dresser, but honestly, at this point, I almost don't want to know. Back in my 20 seconds and 30 seconds, I might have sought revenge on her by being with someone else, recording it and showing her. But I've matured since then and know that responding with wrongdoing doesn't make things right. After spending years with someone, it's going to be challenging to be alone once I move out. It's something I'll have to deal with, I suppose. I'll be relocating a couple of cities away from here. I've already moved some of my stuff into storage, so when I'm ready to leave for good, which will be soon, hopefully I'll be able to do the rest by myself. It's definite that I'm moving out. There's no turning back. I don't have any family left in this state. My parents are gone. This weekend they had another party, and guess who showed up? The other man. I bet they were all whispering and snickering about me behind my back. It was tough, but I managed to resist the urge to storm over there and do something I would later regret. Disrespect is something I can't stand for. Last night, I confronted her, demanding to know the real reason why she cheated on me. I didn't buy her drunk excuse for a second. Her response was vague: "I don't want him, believe me," and she gave me no real explanation for her actions. I even suggested that if she thinks he's better looking than me, she can have him, but who knows, maybe I'm overthinking it. Soon. Enough. I'll be out of here and ready to start a new chapter in my life. Meanwhile, her life is about to take a major hit. Second story. After nearly 25 years of marriage, approaching our 20th anniversary next year, I faced a devastating revelation just over a week ago. It all began innocently. I made some raw cookie dough for a snack and sat down while it chilled. My husband's phone was on the coffee table, playing an ad on Words with Friends. Playfully, I decided to use his account to play a low word on his game. As I waited for the ad to finish, I realized he might catch me near his phone, so I switched to his texts. The conversation had only initials, not a full name, discussing a trial related to his work. However, it took a turn when he mentioned his parents' adopted dog, and the person responded, "Aw, that is so cute." My stomach dropped, and just then he walked around the corner as my phone rang. In haste, I put his phone back and took the call in the bedroom, which was from my sister. As he came in towards the end of the call, I hung up and asked him about the initials. He persistently lied until I insisted on checking his phone, and he promptly deleted the thread about the trial and the dog. As the loading line slowly progressed across the screen, I held my husband's phone and pleaded for honesty. He kept denying that there was anything to reveal until the line was almost complete, and he finally said, "Her name is AP, and she lives in our old state." After reading through the deleted texts, I managed to piece together the truth. He met her at a retirement party for a coworkera gathering I couldn't attend because our dog was sick and had to be put down. While he was away the night after the party, he texted her that he was on his way back to his hotel in an Uber, arriving sooner than she and another female coworker heading back home. She responded that they were too tired to drive, and he texted back, telling her to come to the hotel. She asked if he wanted her to come, and he responded with, "You need to get y'all home, I understand." It was painful to read, especially with the poor grammar. He sent her a message the day after the party expressing how much he enjoyed watching her sleep and how soft her skin and hair were. Throughout the weekend, he updated her on his plans, boasting about having fun without going too far. She admitted to noticing how touchy-feely he was. When he returned home, he told her he'd been having a hard time since he got back, missing her and being happy only at work. However, her responses were not particularly enthusiastic. For instance, when he said, "I miss you," she responded with, "Oh yeah?" Then he asked, "Do you miss me?" And she answered yes. Most of her responses were one-word answers like, "That's nice, you don't say," or This isn't the first time this has happened in our marriage. It occurred in year 6 and year 8, leading us to therapy to address boundaries and the realization that flirting and keeping in touch with someone outside of the marriage is infidelity. According to him, he cheated this time because he felt lonely in our old state. Since I moved to our new state 3 years ago, we spent 2 years flying back and forth, waiting for his job transfer. He claims he started talking to her around February 2020 when she joined their office, but it remained innocent until the weekend of the party in July 2020. Since then, he has been with me here in our new state. I've already initiated divorce proceedings and told him to move out next week. Now he's begging me to take him back, promising individual therapy to overcome his urge to cheat and lie. I reminded him that the first time he cheated was supposed to be the last, and the second time was also supposed to be the last. So why would this time be any different? Update today, we officially initiated the divorce process. It's expected to be completed in about a month. He agreed to give me everything I requested, and both of us are undergoing individual counseling. While he's reading not just Friends, I'm reading Leave a Cheater, Gain a Life. He moved into his own apartment, but we've arranged for our dogs to have occasional playdates. He desires reconciliation, but I cannot. The memories of his affair are too painful to overlook. I even had a dream where he acted violently, and I responded by reminding him that such actions were unprecedented. Strangely, his affair partner said the same after spending a night together at a friend's house following a coworker's retirement party. I can't forget the hurtful things he said and did with her. She got the optimistic, flirty guy, while I got someone who came home exhausted every day, attributing it to demanding work. Initially, he portrayed himself as a sufferer to gain her sympathy, but now he admits those were lies. My so-called friends have been unhelpful, warning me about the challenging dating scene and predicting loneliness. And my family situation is equally troublesome, with my sister trying to leave her husband for an affair partner who is already married with kids. Meanwhile, my mother sympathizes with my cheating husband, suggesting he needs to make it up to me. It's ironic, given her history of cheating on my father, leading to their divorce years ago. The only person I can confide in is my father, but even then, I'm hesitant to admit how scared and anxious I am about leaving the only romantic relationship I've had since I was 16. I plan to take a trip to see my brother in a sunny state, hoping it'll provide me with some clarity. My father bluntly states that my soon-to-be ex-husband is a grown man who knew right from wrong and chose the latter. Initially, I thought I could stay civil until I got what I wanted, but now I'm unsure. While we technically don't need to be in contact anymore since everything's been sorted out, I'm not quite ready for complete no contact. I don't want to reconcile, but maybe. There's a way for gradual detachment. On March 3, 2022, our divorce was finalized and I was granted everything, including the house equity and alimony. As we started settling into our new lives, we agreed to remain friends. During the divorce process, we assisted each other by watching each other's dogs during travels or work, and we even spent time at each other's places for a post-mortem on our relationship to heal. My therapist approved, provided we set clear boundaries. She advised waiting at least 6 months before starting to date again, considering my vulnerability. I discussed this with my ex, and we agreed it would be easier to hear about each other's dating lives directly. He claims he has no interest in dating and still wants me back, even after I explore other options. He also promised not to date anyone until after I had started dating, ensuring there's no possibility of reconciliation. It was just another ordinary evening when I had his dog over at my house, and out of nowhere, Facebook suggested that I be friends with his coworker's girlfriend. I wasn't even friends with his coworker, so I assumed he was, and surely he was. My mind started racing, and I became convinced that he was messaging her and flirting, replicating what had caused the end of our 20-year marriage. When he arrived to pick up the dog, I couldn't resist the temptation and asked if I could take a look at his phone in my proudest moment. He handed it over, and to my relief, I found no direct messages with her. However, he was texting 2 other women, claiming they were just friends. He questioned why I was so upset, even though we were already divorced and it was evident we wouldn't reconcile. He wasn't dating anyone either. We had agreed to keep each other informed if we started dating, but that wasn't the case here. I explained my upset, mentioning it was triggering for me. It was painful that he claimed zero interest in moving on, yet was secretly talking to a woman at work. The issue wasn't him talking to others, it was his deceitful behavior resurfacing. I attempted to maintain a friendship with my ex-husband, but it wasn't straightforward. Facebook suggested being friends with his coworker's girlfriend, making me wonder if he was secretly flirting with her. Requesting to see his phone, I discovered he was texting 2 women, claiming they were just friends. In our discussion, we agreed that keeping secrets wouldn't work if we wanted to sustain a friendship. For a few days, he shared his location and plans, making me feel more secure. However, when I asked if he'd be upset about me visiting a single male friend alone, he admitted he would be. Denying any wrongdoing, he asserted the female coworker was just a supportive friend. Upon asking to see his phone again, I found he had lied. Although turning down her invitation, he planned to visit her office the next day and expressed an interest in seeing her place. It was evident he wasn't entirely honest, raising doubts about maintaining our friendship. He attempted to defend his secretive behavior, stating he talks to female coworkers the same way he talks to male coworkers. I agreed, but reminded him she's not just a friend, she's the person he hurt and traumatized. I emphasized my right to set boundaries and protect myself from triggers in exchange for the privilege of being his friend. I broke down in tears, expressing hurt over his involvement in potentially romantic relationships despite our agreement to be transparent. The conversation concluded with him leashing her dog, subtly indicating he wanted me to leave. Fed up with feeling used, I took my dog and informed him that I wouldn't be doing him any more favors, including watching his dog or helping with his truck. He responded with an okay, indicating he didn't genuinely care about losing me as a friend. Entering my house, guilt overcame me. Why did I mention the dog? I didn't want to lose my furry companion, but I also didn't want to see his face. Using a dog door, I texted him a compromise. He could drop off and pick up the dog from the yard without me having to face him. Regret overwhelmed me like a tidal wave. Why didn't I listen to everyone who advised me to cut him off completely? I thought I could handle being friends and setting boundaries, but I was mistaken. I believed I was healing, but the pain feels as raw as it did on December. I caught my fiancé cheating with him the day before our wedding, and they were shocked when I did. Hey there, I'm Rick, 27, male. My ex-girlfriend Maya, 25, female, and I were deeply in love. Well, at least I was head over heels for her. I never thought she would betray my trust and cheat on me like she eventually did. When Maya and I first crossed paths, she had just graduated from college, and I was already working at a rapidly growing tech company. It was like a spark ignited between us from the beginning, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what made her so special. Our initial encounter took place at a birthday party for my friend's sister, where Maya and my friend's sister had been college buddies. I think she must have noticed my glances in her direction during the party because she was looking back at me. After some internal debate, I finally mustered the courage to approach her. I wasn't as slim as I am now. I carried a bit of extra weight, which is a genetic trait in my family and something I've had since childhood. Over the years, I've faced rejections and even had girls laugh in my face when I tried to approach them, so I didn't anticipate anything different with Maya. She was absolutely stunning, and I braced myself for either a cold shoulder or her ignoring me. But she surprised me. She engaged with me politely, and we spent the entire night talking and having an amazing time. I finally felt good and confident after a long time, all thanks to that night. Our connection was so strong that we swapped contact information, and I wasted no time calling her when I got home. That marked the beginning of us spending more time together, going on lunch dates, and watching our friendship blossom over time. Maya stood out from other girls her age in a special way. She was kind, sharp-witted, and smart, qualities I recognized from our very first conversation. My attraction to her went beyond her physical beauty. What truly drew me to Maya was her intelligence and sense of humor. Not many girls had given me the chance to go on multiple dates, but Maya gave me that opportunity generously. Intelligence had always captivated me. I didn't enjoy being around people without ambition, direction, or future plans, and Maya embodied all of that. Fresh out of college, she was actively pursuing job opportunities, diving into a whirlwind of interviews, and so dedicated to her career path. Witnessing her commitment was inspiring. I hadn't experienced a serious relationship since high school. Not because I couldn't maintain one, but because the girls were seeking something more than the love of a nerdy guy, which I admittedly lacked back then. Hence, meeting and dating someone like Maya felt like a significant achievement for me. It had been 3 months since she graduated, but Maya was struggling to find a job. She'd moved out of the college dorm and into her friend's place, but making ends meet was getting tough. Her parents weren't financially well off enough to support her after graduation. They'd made it clear that she needed to take care of herself. Unfortunately, her friend's living situation wasn't ideal, as the friend was often inattentive and had her boyfriend over frequently in their one-bedroom flat. This arrangement was negatively affecting Maya's mental health, so I suggested she take a break and move in with me. Even though I was just beginning my career in the tech industry, my salary was decent. I earned enough to provide for both of us without needing her financial contribution. We shared a spacious one-bedroom apartment, and I took care of rent, bills, and groceries all on my own. I never minded it because I loved her and thought it was worth spending extra money on her. Blind love, right? Throughout our relationship, things went smoothly, and we rarely had any significant arguments. Maya managed the household chores like dishes and laundry, handled grocery shopping, and met my personal needs in bed. She was fantastic in bed, and I cherished every moment we spent together. Before Maya and I became a couple, she shared her past experience with an offensive ex-boyfriend from college. I assured her that I was a gentleman and would keep my word. Throughout my life, I had never struggled with anger issues and had never resorted to violence, even with women, so she could feel safe around me. Surprisingly or not, I had never been unfaithful in previous relationships and had no intention of cheating on her either. My job allowed for a mix of remote and on-site work, so I balanced my time between our home and the office, which meant we could spend a good amount of time together. To show my transparency and commitment, I proposed a rule that we'd inform each other about our whereabouts, the people we were with, and our activities whenever we went out. I did this to demonstrate my sincerity and to assure her that I had nothing to hide. As our relationship developed, we introduced each other to our families and gradually got to know each other's circle of friends, especially those who were close to us. I didn't have a best friend, but Maya did. Her name was Andrea. They were roommates in college and spent a lot of time together. Andrea visited our house frequently, and she felt like part of the family. Unlike Maya, Andrea worked as a manager at a popular retail store in our city and shared a home with her two sisters, who were also working professionals. According to Andrea, Maya had the opportunity to work at the same supermarket, but she declined in favor of aiming for a corporate job. It seemed Maya had grown accustomed to me taking care of her, though I never mentioned this to her. Andrea playfully teased Maya about this, calling her spoiled. Maya defended herself, saying she had worked hard during her teenage years and throughout college with various part-time jobs, justifying her desire for relaxation and care. I was more than happy to provide her that support. I had no reservations about taking care of her. Actually, I felt a sense of pride in being able to care for her needs. During an evening at a fancy restaurant celebrating my promotion, Maya surprised me by asking, "What if we got married?" Caught off guard, I stumbled for a moment. Although it wasn't a complete shock, I had been contemplating the idea of marrying her, but there were still many factors to consider. I responded that we would marry when the timing felt right, and her face lit up with a smile. Honestly, I wanted Maya to establish her career before taking our relationship to the next step. The thought of marriage and having a family had always been in my mind, and since Maya entered my life, I envisioned a future with her. I even had a ring ready to propose, but I was waiting for her career to stabilize first. However, she stumbled upon the engagement ring in my closet, which led me to make an impromptu proposal sooner than planned. When Maya shared the news with her best friend Andrea, the reaction was more shock than joy. But it wasn't the typical shock of a best friend getting married, it seemed to be the shock of her marrying me. I had anticipated greater enthusiasm, especially considering Andrea would be the maid of honor. Yet her response was, "Are you serious?" Andrea casually dropped her purse on the floor and held Maya's ring, then glanced at me while forcing a smile. Having spent a considerable amount of time with them, I could easily distinguish between her genuine smiles and forced ones, though I didn't mention it to Maya. I had a feeling that Andrea wasn't genuinely happy for her friend. In the past, I noticed Andrea had always been excessively kind to me. Once, the three of us were hanging out at our apartment. While Maya was in the kitchen preparing some snacks, Andrea subtly hinted to me that Maya might not be the person I believed her to be. I understood her insinuation, but I pretended not to catch on. Curiously, I asked for clarification, and Andrea vaguely mentioned that I would eventually figure things out. She was under the influence of alcohol at the time, and her message wasn't straightforward, so I couldn't draw any solid conclusions from that interaction. We began planning the wedding, but Maya's desire for an extravagant event clashed with my budget and priorities. She wanted a grand celebration, but I believed in life beyond the wedding day. I wanted kids soon, which meant a larger apartment and responsibilities. Despite Maya's reasons, I was against a big wedding. She mentioned the idea of a costly dream wedding, but we both knew it wasn't realistic. Surprisingly, Maya found a job a few months before the wedding. I couldn't afford her desired gown or her bridesmaids' dresses, so she got a job to cover her expenses. Her choice impressed me, and I hoped she'd continue her career after marriage. Although she had a job, she didn't contribute to wedding costs. Her earnings went toward her gown, shoes, accessories, and her bridesmaids' needs, so I ended up paying for the venue hall, cakes, and almost everything on my own. About 2 weeks before our wedding, Andrea started texting me more often. She'd ask about my sleep and shopping, finding many reasons to text me. However, when we met or she visited our house to help Maya, she acted normally. To avoid suspicion, I had to tell Andrea to stop calling and texting excessively as I worried it might harm my relationship with Maya. I hesitated to tell Maya, fearing it could affect their friendship or the wedding preparations. Knowing how much Maya trusted Andrea, I suspected Andrea might be trying to seduce me or change my mind about marrying Maya. The night of Maya's bachelorette party, I got a call from Andrea while drinking with friends in the hotel club area where we were staying. She said she had something to show me. At first, I didn't want to go because I believed she wanted to seduce me one last time. But when she mentioned Maya and a familiar name, I took one of my friends and went upstairs. I arrived at the hotel room where they were having a small party. Outside the door, I saw Andrea waiting for me. She said something unbelievable, and when I opened the door, my heart sank. Just before opening the door, I heard soft sounds coming from their room, and my chest tightened as I touched the door handle. To my biggest surprise, I saw Maya sitting on another man's lap, who I assumed was the male dancer they had hired for entertainment. When she noticed me, she quickly got off him and struggled to cover herself with the sheets. Right away, I recognized him. Like Andrea had told me, he was her ex-boyfriend from college. I couldn't hold back my tears. It was too much to handle, so I left without saying anything. My friend who had accompanied me upstairs was also shocked. He tried to talk to me or maybe calm me down, but I pushed him away and left. As I walked down the hallway, I overheard Maya yelling at Andrea, "Why would you do this to me? My life was going perfectly, but you ruined it." Andrea shot back, "I told you he deserved better. Rick has been nothing but good to you. I advised you to break up with your loser boyfriend and be with Rick, but you wanted to have it both ways." I didn't bother to turn around. It was hard to believe that Maya had been deceiving me all along. It hurt too much to accept, and I wished I could manage the pain, but I couldn't. Andrea even tried to come after me, but I slammed the door in her face. I drank until I couldn't tell the difference between a shadow and a real person. The next morning, I woke up to a bunch of missed calls from Maya and others. Maya was already wearing her wedding dress when I left the room. She looked so unhappy when she saw me. She rushed over and asked why I wasn't getting ready for our wedding, and that made me really angry. Out of frustration, I pushed her away and declared that I was canceling the wedding. Everyone was surprised and kept asking why I changed my mind. Even my parents were stunned to see me like that. Nobody saw it coming, especially after all the money I'd spent on the preparations. But I was too heartbroken to explain. I glared at Maya, feeling furious. I went back to my room and locked myself in. From inside, I could hear my parents and some friends asking Maya why I made that choice, but she didn't answer. She just acted like she fainted, and a couple of people caught her before she hit the floor. After cleaning up from the previous night, I left the hotel room with a few things I had brought. I turned off my phone after leaving an apology message in my friend's WhatsApp group chat, and then I switched it off. Please don't blame me, I didn't know how else to respond. It's been a week since then, and I still don't know how to accept that I was being deceived. Update: Hey everyone, thanks for your comments. I really appreciate them. Some of you mentioned in my original post why I didn't check into my friend's sister's background before dating Maya. Well, the thing is, I messed up. I didn't feel the urge to do it thoroughly, although I vaguely asked my friend's sister about Maya during the early dating days. She mentioned they were in different areas and that Maya was a friend of her friend. After college, they lost touch, so it didn't reveal much. Speaking of Maya, I saw her yesterday, and she was furious with me for not showing up at our wedding. It's a bit ironic, isn't it? She brushed aside what she did and painted me as the bad guy in this situation. She told her parents that I called off the wedding because I had too much to drink the night before and wasn't in my right mind. I believe she's confusing my silence with stupidity. I didn't want any ties with her anymore, and I couldn't fathom why she thought we could rekindle anything. To add to the mess, she admitted she was still involved with her ex-boyfriend while we were dating, which shattered me even more. She claimed it was because I was always busy with work and didn't give her the attention she craved. Right now, I'm feeling really confused. I never ignored Maya or denied her needs. She was the reason I worked so hard to manage our expenses and take care of her. As I write this, the idea of her secretly being with her boyfriend still haunts me. She's even suggesting we set a new wedding date to avoid embarrassment. It's clear that her single apology for hurting me shows she never truly loved or valued me as much as I did her. It was more of a one-sided thing. I've told her I can't marry her. I just can't. In the meantime, I've asked her to leave my house and change the locks. After meeting Maya yesterday, I also talked to Andrea to express my gratitude for helping me avoid a disaster. Through Andrea, I learned that Maya was using my money to support her boyfriend, and whenever she asked for a large sum for something, she gave it to him. I didn't mention earlier that while we lived together, Maya went to the gym every evening. She was really focused on staying in shape, and I didn't think anything was wrong with that. But now I've discovered she was meeting her college boyfriend every day, often lying about being with Andrea instead. She only asked Andrea to cover for her. The reason Andrea was so surprised when Maya showed her the engagement ring was because a few days prior, Maya had told Andrea she wanted to settle down with her college boyfriend as she was deeply in love with him. Now I understand why Andrea kept texting and calling. She wanted to tell me what was going on, but I didn't give her the chance. Sometimes I feel like I brought this upon myself because I was so naive and got easily trapped. I've made my decision, and there won't be another wedding. I'll be meeting her in 2 days to return her things. I'll provide another update soon. Update 2. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. I met Maya again for the second time 3 weeks ago, and something unexpected happened. Meanwhile, when I told her we were never going to be together again, let alone get married, she looked me in the eye and said, "Do you really think canceling the wedding will help you find a better woman?" Laugh out loud, no sane woman would want to be with a guy as overweight as you. Consider yourself lucky to have someone like me. That insult hit me hard. I'd never been treated that way, especially by someone I once loved or who claimed to love me. That's when I realized the kind of person she was. It's tough to admit, but I understood that she had been using me all along. I know I'm overweight, but I didn't want a marriage where my wife felt like she was doing me a favor. I knew those kinds of marriages usually end up bad. We didn't talk much that day. She threw my engagement ring at me and stormed off angrily. I blocked her on all our shared social media and her number too. But before I blocked her parents, I went to see them and let them know what their daughter had been up to. They were really disappointed when they learned the truth. About a week later, after Maya stormed out of the cafe, a strange number started calling me repeatedly. When I answered, I recognized Maya's voice. It sounded different, more composed and respectful. She got straight to the point and asked if we could meet because she had something important to share. But I insisted she tell me over the phone. However, before she could, she began apologizing. She wanted me to forgive and forget everything from our past so we could start anew. Can you believe it? Maya said she wanted to tell me she was pregnant, which seemed really strange to me. Without giving me a chance to respond, she added, "I'm carrying your baby, Rick," and I burst out laughing loudly. I told her it wasn't April Fool's Day yet, and she was already playing tricks. Then I hung up on her. As I expected, she didn't stop calling, so I had to block that number as well. Turns out her boyfriend left her once he realized she couldn't support him anymore, and when she told him about the pregnancy, he left. So when that didn't work, she thought she could fool me. Since then, she's been attempting to contact me using different numbers, and I've been declining her calls. Just 2 days ago, she showed up at my house without an invitation. Andrea was with me. When she saw Andrea, she verbally attacked her with nasty words, calling Andrea a disgrace who ruined her friend's life. She even accused both Andrea and me of having an affair and betraying her. I had to involve the police, and yesterday I got a restraining order against her. I can only imagine how tough her life must be without a job and someone to support her with the baby. As for Andrea and me, there's nothing romantic, and I doubt we'll ever become a couple. She comes by occasionally to see how I'm doing. Right now, I just want to get my life back on track, and hopefully, my broken heart will heal eventually. Even though I can't forgive her for what she did to me, I suppose she's facing the consequences. I'm still working on healing and moving forward. Any advice would mean a lot, thanks. Story 2. I can't grasp why people cheat. What kind of person are we to intentionally cause the worst pain to someone we promise to love? Someone who's been there for us through thick and thin, and who made countless sacrifices for our happiness. In the process, we strip away our loved one's dignity, pride, self-worth, and many other things that can't be restored. My betrayal happened 25 years ago, shattering me completely. I recently read posts from guys whose betrayals also occurred years ago, which inspired me to write. Although advice, support, and condemnation aren't really relevant anymore, if you had asked me up until that day, I would have said I was fortunate. Despite coming from a modest family, I had everything else because of Katie. We were born in the same month, first children to young parents living on the same street, just a couple of blocks apart. So Katie was a part of my life right from the beginning, and we became close without even realizing it. We spent so much time together that it felt natural for her to be at my place or for me to be at hers. By the end of elementary school, a favorite activity for boys and girls was to meet somewhere before going home and share a few kisses. It was never spoken, but I didn't kiss other girls, and she only kissed me. Starting high school was a tough time for me. I should mention that Katie was incredibly beautiful, like in the top percentile of gorgeousness. I had never seen anyone like her. All the boys noticed her. The informal rules from elementary school didn't apply anymore, and soon all the boys in school were trying to get her attention. They'd claim spots near her locker, push each other to catch glimpses of her between classes and at lunch. Boys in cars would intercept us on our way to school. I felt devastated. How could a 9th grade boy stand a chance against bigger, stronger, wealthier boys who had cars and money? My enthusiasm for school disappeared. I became gloomy, stopped studying, and even stopped walking her to school. I actually told my mom that I wanted to drop out, but Katie's mom came to the rescue by calling my mom to check on me. I hadn't visited in a while and Katie was worried. She invited me over the next evening and the three of us sat down to talk. When I explained my feelings, Katie reassured me that in her eyes I am and always would be her boyfriend. My zest for life returned. However, the unwanted attention from other guys didn't go away. By the time 12th grade ended, I'd given her a promise ring, which she accepted. We started planning our futures. She wanted to become a dental technician, while I decided on a general year of arts and sciences at university. We kept living with our parents to save money, and due to an unexpected offer from her parents, this worked out well for both of us. One of our favorite activities was driving out to the countryside, away from city lights. We'd park the car, drape an unzipped sleeping bag over the hood and windshield, toss a couple of pillows for our heads, cover up with a light blanket, and snuggle while watching the sky, talking and making wishes on falling stars before moving to the back seat. We'd been sexually active since the summer before. This time we fell asleep and didn't wake up before morning. When we arrived, her parents were already making breakfast, so I braced myself for a confrontation. But instead, Katie's mom calmly invited us to sit down and eat. I waited for the other shoe to drop. They inquired where we had been, and at 19 I felt old enough to tell them the truth. It was time to be upfront. Both of them smiled, and her dad assured us that their main concern was our safety. He mentioned that instead of using the back seat, I would be welcome to sleep in her room. By the way, this was before cell phones were common, so parents didn't always know where their kids were or what they were up to. Katie's mom told me that it had been obvious for a while that we deeply loved each other and were inseparable. Her dad expressed pride that his daughter had found such a fine young man. Our intimacy was always amazing. We spent hours exploring each other's bodies and learning how to bring pleasure. I felt like I was on top of the world. To keep things concise, I'll fast forward, though I wish I could share more. The efforts I made to show her my love and the countless wonderful experiences we had as a couple could help readers understand the depth of my devastation when everything crumbled. After completing her course, she quickly landed a job. We got an apartment together after my 3rd year. I had decided, with her input, to become a teacher. While I could have pursued other paths, teaching gave us more time to be together, and that extra time with her was truly priceless. After my 4th year, I proposed, and we set a wedding date for the early summer after my graduation. We stayed in our apartment for 1 more year, and the year after that, I secured a job. We purchased a house with the intention of living there forever. Our plan was to start a family once I received a permanent contract. At the age of 28, we started our family by welcoming our son, David. I was incredibly proud of both Katie and David. I acted like Katie was the first woman in the world to give birth. The experience was wonderful yet terrifying. While I had prepared for the birth, the intensity of it caught me off guard. I relied on advice from the two mothers and often played the role of a concerned caretaker. I was always wondering about her feelings, her needs, and what I could do to help. The birth brought Katie and me even closer. People often say that once children are born, they become the parents' top priority, surpassing their partners. Not in my case. Katie remained a miracle and a wonder to me. She had always been my best friend, lover, soulmate, and more. Now she had become my very soul. Without her, there simply was no me. Occasionally, in moments of emptiness within my heart, I can almost recall these feelings. My pride grew even greater when Hannah arrived 3 years later, right after David. Katie's employers were generous to their staff. Every 2nd year, they'd give the hygienists, technicians, receptionists, and others a 5-day-long weekend. The women would plan everything, and the practice covered all the expenses. Once the kids were a bit older, David was 10, Hannah was 7, I made arrangements for a special trip. Instead of the usual visits to the grandparents, we were going to a distant city with a famous mall that had a massive water park, indoor amusements, a submarine ride, and more. Quite exciting for the 3 of us. When the time came, I drove Katie to the airport where she was meeting the others, and we set off. To get to the point, on the 2nd day, as the kids and I were heading to the wave pool, something caught my eye and left me stunned. Outside the park, but on their way there, Katie and an unfamiliar person were walking hand in hand. In this very place, this destination was frequented by countless people from all over. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to note that anyone who had seen her before would immediately recognize her due to her appearance. "There's Mommy," declared Hannah. Tears were already flowing when Davy inquired, "Dad?" I suppose he wanted me to reassure him. The couple that was cheating found a pair of reclining beach chairs and before sitting down shared a kiss while hugging each other. "Dad?" Davy asked me again, but I was just gasping and couldn't produce any sounds. After the cheaters separated and took their seats, Hannah began running toward Katie, calling, "Mommy, Mommy!" As Katie recognized Hannah, she was in full panic, scanning the crowd until she finally saw us. I walked towards them, and she buried her face in the bath towels she had brought. I stopped in front of the AP and asked Hannah to come to me. "So, jerk, I want to introduce you to the children whose family you just destroyed. I hope their faces haunt you for the rest of your miserable life." He responded with a practiced crap-eating grin, then went and sat a few chairs away without saying a word. I told the kids to stay with their mom and quickly headed to our room. I changed as fast as I could, leaving most of my belongings behind along with the kids. At the reception, I explained that Katie would eventually want to know my whereabouts, and it was fine to tell her I had left and to let her into the room to retrieve the kids' things. I'm not proud of it, but I thought that having the kids around might interrupt their plans. Then I began a very long and lonely 8-hour drive home, making several stops along the highway as my sobbing sometimes became too overwhelming to continue. When I reached our house, I disconnected the phone jack from the wall. I sat down and wrote each of the kids a long letter, placing them on their pillows. I packed a hockey bag with random clothes and items I thought I'd need. My initial romantic plans for the bathtub were abandoned, and I filled it with water and poured in a significant amount of bleach. Then I gathered all the wedding pictures and photos of us from before we had children, along with any lingerie and intimate gifts I had given her. Even the wedding certificate was included. Before I departed, I arranged the house as if I were hosting the reception. I had planned for her in the previous week. I had purchased 200 white candles of various sizes and asked 2 of Katie's colleagues to help me collect oils and lotions she might enjoy. I arranged the candles like a pathway from the entrance to the bathroom. The bathroom was filled with candles on every available surface, and the bath oils and lotions were placed nearby. I had obtained new large hotel-quality white bath towels placed on the toilet seat. Atop them were the lingerie and intimate items I had purchased for the occasion, although I had cut them into pieces. The kids were to stay with their grandparents, and our neighbors were tasked with lighting the candles after I called them from the airport. Our bedroom was also filled with candles, and I folded back the sheets on her side of the bed and scattered rose petals over them. It was meant to be an unforgettable homecoming. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table, took a few pictures of the kids, and left for good. In my state of mind, I couldn't face anyone, so I checked into a budget motel to wait for. Tuesday, taking advantage of the long weekend. I informed my principal that I wouldn't be able to come in due to my situation. On Tuesday morning, I met with a divorce lawyer and outlined my terms. I would withdraw half the money from our checking or savings account, whichever had more funds, but would forego any claims to other assets. I requested visitation rights during holidays. I made it clear that all communication should go through the lawyer, as I wouldn't be contacting Katie directly, and my whereabouts were to remain confidential. I headed to a region experiencing a housing boom, aiming to find any basic job that could cover my expenses. The thought of returning to teaching never crossed my mind. My lawyer did an excellent job of keeping our communication focused on legal matters and ensuring my location remained confidential. He also managed the arrangements for the children. I could elaborate on how I handled situations with the kids and my in-laws, but I want to circle back to my initial point. Was the affair worth it? It shattered me. Imagine a light bulb with a burnt-out filament, my spirit, my zest for life, my essence all consumed. Self-esteem and confidence obliterated with no chance of recovery. Today, years later, I still struggle to trust women. I can't bring myself to open up and be vulnerable. Friends try to set me up, but I always decline. My sexual desire didn't survive the affair either. I was mostly absent in my children's lives. 2 weeks in the summer hardly sufficed. Was that worth it? Just a mistake. I find it hard to provide definitive answers anymore, but please, for the sake of all that's good, ladies, think about the consequences before engaging in a fleeting affair. Does your husband or boyfriend deserve this? Update: dealing with the kids turned out to be relatively manageable once I accepted a significant compromise. I initially secured custody for Christmas, Easter, and 3 weeks during the summer. However, the kids preferred spending Christmas and Easter at their grandparents' house, and I recognized the benefits. So, through my attorney, I traded those holidays for an additional week in the summer. There were no major disputes about the kids. During summer, my siblings or parents would bring them over, and I'd enroll them in swimming lessons. Since I had only 2 weeks of vacation, I greatly appreciated the support from my family. Regular phone calls with the kids on weekends at my parents' place became the norm, though it wasn't the same as being there in person. As they grew older and could drive, I allowed them to choose their plans. Usually they visited, except when sports got in the way. I helped David secure well-paying summer jobs, so he willingly spent the entire summer with me after grades 10, 11, and 12. They would independently visit about every other Christmas. I didn't keep track meticulously. Over time, Hannah and I developed a strong connection as she wanted to comprehend my pain and its impact on me. It's easy to empathize with someone who's hurting, but she genuinely understood and forgave me for my disappearance. Her focus was on me, not on the failed marriage, the family, or making changes. The topic of their mother only emerged as the kids got older. I'll share one more post, but I'll need to gradually step away from the forum. Initially, I had hoped that sharing my story might bring relief, and indeed it felt good to release the story to the world. Lately, I've come across stories that have truly touched me, and I don't require assistance to feel sorrowful. One story was about a man whose wife cheated on him, and his 3 daughters kept the affair a secret from him. Many have inquired about my age. I'm now 65, and I was 38 back then.
Story 3.
Colton Vance's office had never felt more suffocating. The familiar hum of fluorescent lights overhead seemed to mock him as he stared at his phone's blank screen. No messages from Brielle again. 3 months ago, she would have texted him during lunch, sharing funny stories about the kids or asking about dinner plans. Now, silence had become their new normal that he rubbed his wedding ring, a nervous habit he developed lately. 15 years of marriage, and suddenly he felt like a stranger in his own home. The golden band caught the afternoon light, reminding him of better days of promises made and kept, at least on his end. Heading out early? Tom from accounting poked his head into Colton's office, interrupting his thoughts. Yeah, Colton started gathering his things, shoving papers into his briefcase with less care than usual. Kids have a thing tonight? It was a lie. There was no thing, but lately he'd been finding excuses to get home earlier, trying to catch. What exactly? He wasn't sure he wanted to know. The drive home felt longer than usual. Each traffic light an opportunity for his mind to wander. Brielle's recent changes played through his head like a slideshow of red flags. The sudden password on her phone, the new gym membership she never seemed to use, the late-night work meetings that left her smelling of unfamiliar cologne last week. He'd found a receipt from La Maison, that fancy French place downtown, tucked in her coat pocket. Date and time, Tuesday afternoon, when she was supposedly having lunch with her sister. The bill had been for 2, but his grip tightened on the steering wheel as he turned onto their street. The familiar row of suburban homes looked the same as always. Manicured lawns, kids' bikes propped against garages, the Webster's golden retriever chasing squirrels. But something felt off about his own house, even from a distance. The curtains were drawn in the living room, unusual for this time of day, when Juniper usually sat by the window. Waiting for him, Colton pulled into his driveway, and his heart stopped. A black Mercedes sat in his spot, its glossy paint job reflecting the setting sun like a knife blade. He didn't recognize the car, but he recognized what it meant. All those nights lying awake, all those unanswered texts, all those distant looks across the dinner table, they suddenly made terrible sense that he killed the engine but didn't get out immediately. Through the living room window, he could see shadows moving behind the drawn curtains. His children should be home from school. Silas would normally be at the kitchen table, wrestling with his pre-algebra homework while complaining about his teacher's unrealistic expectations. Juniper would be in her usual spot by the window, watching cartoons and drawing in her sketchbook, the one he'd given her for her 9th birthday. Just 2 months ago, the thought of his children made him move. Whatever was happening inside his house, they shouldn't have to face it alone. He grabbed his briefcase, more out of habit than necessity, and stepped out of his car. The Mercedes' presence felt like an intruder, its sleek lines and luxury badge a statement of wealth that made his sensible sedan look shabby in comparison. The front door felt foreign under his touch, as if the house itself was warning him about what lay inside. The familiar creak of the hinges seemed louder than usual in the uncomfortable silence. No TV sounds, no children's laughter, no music from Brielle's kitchen radio, just the heavy weight of something wrong. "Dad!" Juniper's voice carried from the living room, but it wasn't her usual excited greeting. There was fear in it, a tremor that made his chest tighten. His little girl, who'd never been afraid to call out to him before, sounded like she was calling for help. "I'm home," he announced, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors as he moved through the entryway. Family photos lined the walls. Christmas mornings, beach vacations, school plays. 15 years of memories watching him walk toward their unraveling. But he rounded the corner into the living room, and the world tilted sideways. Brielle lounged on their couch, the one they'd picked out together during their 10th anniversary shopping trip, the one where they'd spent countless family movie nights pressed against a man Colton had never seen before. The stranger was tall, muscular, wearing an expensive watch that caught the light like his car outside. His arm was draped possessively around Brielle's shoulders, his fingers playing with her hair in a gesture so intimate it made Colton's stomach turn. Silas stood by the window, his 12-year-old frame rigid with tension. He'd grown so much this year, shooting up like a weed, but right now he looked small again, uncertain. Juniper clutched her brother's hand, her wide eyes darting between her parents, her sketchbook abandoned on the floor. "What's going on here?" Colton's voice came out steadier than he felt. Years of controlling his emotions at work serving him well in this moment. Brielle didn't even sit up straight. She remained nestled against the stranger, and Colton noticed her wedding ring was missing, leaving a pale band of skin that looked like an accusation. "You're home early." "That doesn't answer my question." Colton's words hung in the air, heavy with 15 years of trust, now shattering like glass. The stranger's lips curled into a smirk as he rose to his full height. He was a few inches taller than Colton, his designer clothes and perfectly styled hair screaming money and privilege. "Name's Rogan. Rogan Tate." His voice carried the casual arrogance of a man used to getting his way. Colton ignored him, his eyes fixed on his wife. The woman who'd held his hand through his father's funeral, who'd cried tears of joy at their children's births, who now looked at him like he was a stranger overstaying his welcome. Brielle? She met his gaze with cold detachment, her green eyes once so warm with love now glacial. "Rogan is staying." Her pause felt like a knife twist. "You're not." The word seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. From the corner of his eye, Colton saw Silas pull Juniper closer, his son's jaw clenched in a way that made him look older than his 12 years. "What do you mean, staying?" Each word felt like gravel in his throat. Behind him, a framed photo of their wedding day watched the scene unfold. Younger versions of themselves smiling, promising forever. Rogan stepped forward, positioning himself between Colton and Brielle like he'd been practicing the move. "It means exactly what it sounds like." He gestured around the room with manicured hands. "I'm the man of the house now. Get out of my home." Colton's voice dropped dangerously low, a tone he'd never used in front of his children before. "You're home?" Rogan laughed, the sound sharp and mocking as it bounced off the walls. "I don't think you understand the situation here, buddy. Your wife's made her choice." His eyes flicked to Brielle, who watched him with undisguised admiration. "And it's not you." Juniper's soft sob cut through the tension like a blade. "Mommy." Brielle didn't even look at her daughter. Her eyes remained fixed on Rogan, a small smile playing at her lips like this was all some private joke between lovers. "Dad." Silas's voice cracked on the word, and Colton heard in it every question a 12-year-old boy shouldn't have to ask about his parents. Colton took a step toward his children, but Rogan blocked his path, chest puffed out like a schoolyard bully. "The kids stay here." "Like hell they do." Colton tried to move past him, thinking only of reaching his children, of getting them away from this nightmare. The slap came out of nowhere, a sharp crack that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Colton's head snapped to the side, his cheek burning from the impact. Juniper screamed. Silas gasped. The sound of his children's terror hit harder than any physical blow. Rogan flexed his hand, admiring the red mark he'd left on Colton's face. "Leave, or I'll throw you out myself." His voice dripped with satisfaction. With the pleasure of domination, time seemed to slow down. Colton touched his cheek, feeling the heat where Rogan's hand had connected. He looked at Brielle, who watched the scene with detached amusement, like she was viewing a mildly entertaining TV show. He looked at his children, Juniper crying into her hands, Silas trembling with a mix of fear and rage that no child should have to feel. Something inside him, something that had been bending for months under the weight of suspicion and betrayal, finally snapped. The first punch caught Rogan by surprise. It connected with his jaw with a satisfying crunch, wiping the smirk off his face. Rogan stumbled backward, knocking over the coffee table. Family photos crashed to the floor, glass shattering across the hardwood like broken promises. "Get upstairs," Colton shouted to his children, his voice raw with emotion. "Now!" Rogan recovered quickly, launching himself at Colton with a roar of wounded pride. They crashed into the wall, sending more picture frames raining down around them. Brielle screamed, finally showing some emotion as her lover and husband grappled in the wreckage of their family home. Colton had never considered himself a violent man. He taught his children that violence wasn't the answer. He'd broken up fights at work, always advocating for calm discussion. But as Rogan's fist grazed his temple, as he heard his daughter's terrified cries and his son's shouts, something primal took over, that he caught Rogan's next punch and twisted. The crack of bones was audible even over Brielle's screams, a sound like dry twigs snapping in winter. Rogan howled, trying to pull away, but Colton's grip was iron. Another twist, another crack, Rogan's other hand rendered useless. "Stop it!" Brielle was on her phone, backing away from the violence she'd invited into their home. "I'm calling the police." Rogan collapsed to the floor, his broken hands cradled against his chest like wounded birds. The arrogance in his face had been replaced by pain and fear, his expensive clothes now wrinkled and stained with his own blood. Dark drops fell from his split lip onto the carpet, the same carpet where Juniper had taken her first steps, where Silas had built pillow forts, where their family had made memories now tainted by betrayal. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. Colton stood in the middle of his destroyed living room, chest heaving, surrounded by the wreckage of his marriage. Reality crashed back in waves, each one bringing new clarity. The family photos scattered across the floor like fallen leaves, his children's terrified faces peering down from the top of the stairs, witnesses to the destruction of their world. The look of hatred Brielle shot him as she knelt beside her lover. All pretense of their 15-year marriage abandoned, the police burst through the front door with practiced efficiency, their commands sharp and clear in the chaos. Colton didn't resist as they cuffed him. He let them read him his rights, the words washing over him like a distant tide. As they let him out, he caught one last glimpse of his family through the doorway. Brielle cradled Rogan's broken hands, whispering soothing words to her lover as paramedics rushed in. She didn't spare a glance for her husband of 15 years, the father of her children, as he was led away in handcuffs. His children watched from the stairs, Silas's face a mask of confusion and betrayal, struggling to understand how his world had shattered so completely. Juniper remained buried in her brother's side, her small frame shaking with sobs, the police car door slammed shut with a finality that felt like an exclamation point on the end of his marriage. Through the window, Colton watched his home, his life, disappear into the growing darkness. The porch light clicked on automatically, just as he'd programmed it to do every evening. One last routine in a life that would never be routine again. As the police car pulled away, Colton's wedding ring caught the last light of day, a final glimmer of what had once been before everything changed. The neighborhood houses blurred past, their warm windows showing happy families living their normal lives. Unaware that just houses away, a family had just imploded. The Mercedes still sat in his driveway, its presence now a monument to betrayal. The holding cell's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Colton sat on the metal bench, his hands still tingling from the handcuffs they'd removed an hour ago. His wedding ring felt like a dead weight on his finger. "Vance!" A guard's voice echoed through the cell block. "Your lawyer's here." The attorney waiting in the consultation room looked exactly like what Colton would expect from a public defender. Tired eyes, rumpled suit, too many cases. But something in his expression shifted as he read through Colton's file. Marcus Reynolds. He introduced himself, extending his hand. "Tell me everything." Colton leaned forward, his voice raw. "He was in my house, with my wife, in front of my kids." "Start from the beginning," Marcus said, pulling out a legal pad. "Every detail matters." For the next hour, Colton relived it all. The Mercedes in the driveway, Rogan's smirk, the slap, the sound of breaking bones. Marcus's pen never stopped moving. "They're charging you with attempted murder," Marcus finally said, looking up from his notes. DA's pushing hard on this one. Attempted murder? Colton's laugh held no humor. He slapped me in front of my children. That's not how your wife is telling it. Marcus's words landed like body blows. She's backing him up. Says you attacked without provocation. Colton's fists clenched. She's lying. I believe you. Marcus closed his notebook. But we need more than your word against theirs. Your kids. No. Colton's voice turned to steel. Leave them out of this. They've seen enough. Then we need something else. Marcus stood, straightening his tie. I'll start digging. In the meantime, say nothing to anyone. Especially not to Brielle if she comes. She won't. Bail hearing came 3 days later. Colton stood before Judge Martinez in his orange jumpsuit, listening as the prosecutor painted him as a dangerous man. Your Honor, the DA argued, her voice sharp with practiced conviction. Mr. Vance showed extreme violence. The victim required extensive surgery on both hands. The victim was in my client's home, Marcus countered, assaulting him in front of his children. Judge Martinez peered over her glasses. Mr. Vance, do you have any prior violent offenses? No, Your Honor. Colton met her gaze steadily. 15 years at the same company. Never even a parking ticket. The judge nodded slowly. Bail is set at $50,000. It took everything Colton had, draining his savings and 401k. But he made bail. Standing outside the courthouse in borrowed clothes, he pulled out his phone. No messages from Brielle. No calls from his kids. We've got 3 weeks until preliminary hearing, Marcus said, handing him a business card. Stay away from your house. Stay away from Brielle. Stay away from Rogan. What about my children? Marcus's expression softened slightly. File for emergency visitation. Through the courts, supervised visits only. It's not ideal. It's bullshit. It's the law. Marcus checked his watch. And Colton? Document everything. Every text, every call, every interaction. We're going to need it all. The courthouse felt colder 3 weeks later. Colton sat at the defendant's table, wearing his best suit, the one he bought for Silas's school ceremonies. The irony wasn't lost on him. Brielle entered with her own lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who probably charged more per hour than Colton made in a week. She didn't look at him as she passed. All rise, the bailiff called out. The Honorable Judge William Preston presiding. The preliminary hearing began with the prosecution's opening statement. The DA stood, her heels clicking against the floor as she approached the jury box. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, this is a case of uncontrolled rage. Mr. Vance didn't just assault Mr. Tate. He tried to kill him. He broke both his hands with calculated precision, showing a level of violence that speaks to intent. Marcus's opening was shorter, more direct. This is a case of a man defending himself in his own home, protecting his children from an aggressor who struck first. The evidence will show that Mr. Vance acted in self-defense after being assaulted in front of his family. Then Brielle took the stand that she dressed carefully conservative blue dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. The perfect picture of a concerned mother. But her eyes were cold when they met Colton's. Mrs. Vance, the DA began, please tell us about your husband's behavior leading up to the incident. Brielle's voice was steady, practiced. He was always unstable, jealous, controlling. When he came home that day and saw Rogan, he just snapped. That's a lie. The words burst from Colton before Marcus could stop him. Mr. Vance, Judge Preston warned, control yourself or you'll be removed. Brielle continued as if he hadn't spoken. He attacked Rogan without warning, without provocation. I was terrified. The children were screaming. And Mr. Tate's presence in your home, the DA prompted. He was there at my invitation. Brielle's lips curved slightly. Colton and I were already separated. He just wouldn't accept it. Marcus stood. Objection, Your Honor. This is the first mention of any separation. There are no legal documents. Sustained, Judge Preston ruled. The jury will disregard that last statement. But Colton saw the damage in the jurors' faces. They were looking at him differently now, seeing the monster Brielle was creating with her careful lies. Mrs. Vance, the DEA continued, what happened after your husband attacked Mr. Tate? He wouldn't stop? Brielle's voice quavered perfectly. He just kept hurting him, breaking his hands. Rogan was screaming, the children were crying, and Colton, he looked like he was enjoying it. Marcus's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Vance, did Mr. Tate strike your husband first? No, absolutely not. Really? Marcus picked up a document. Because your daughter's initial statement to the responding officers. Objection. The DA jumped up. Those statements were taken from a minor without parental consent. Sustained. Judge Preston's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Colton watched his wife lie under oath, rewriting their history with each careful answer. She never looked at him directly, but he caught her smirking when Marcus's questions were blocked. The prosecution's next witness was Rogan himself, but he came to the stand with both hands still bandaged, playing up his injuries. His expensive suit couldn't quite hide the fear that flashed across his face when he passed close to Colton. Mr. Tate, the DA began, please tell us about the events of that evening. Rogan's version painted him as an innocent visitor, Colton as a raging madman. He just attacked, he claimed, holding up his bandaged hands. I never even raised a hand to him. Now my career as a surgeon is over. I may never operate again. Marcus's cross-examination was even shorter this time. Mr. Tate, you claim you never struck Mr. Vance? That's correct. Then how do you explain the bruise on his face in the booking photos? Objection. Speculation. Sustained. Round and round it went, truth drowning in legal procedure. Colton watched his life being dissected and reassembled into a story he didn't recognize. Marcus's hand on his shoulder stopped Colton from rising as court reconvened after lunch. Something in his lawyer's expression had changed. What is it? Colton asked, noting the slight smile playing at Marcus's lips. Remember when I said I was digging? Marcus pulled out his tablet. Your neighbor across the street, Mrs. Henderson? Sweet old lady, loves her doorbell camera. Colton's heart skipped a beat. She recorded everything? Better. Marcus's smile widened. She records everything, including Rogan's visits over the past 3 months, and Brielle's careful timing of when you'd be at work. The DA was already launching into her closing arguments when Marcus stood. Your Honor, the defense would like to present new evidence. Objection. The DA spun around. Any evidence should have been presented during discovery. This evidence only came to light this morning, Your Honor, Marcus countered. It directly contradicts testimony given under oath in this courtroom. Judge Preston studied both attorneys. Approached the bench. Colton watched the heated whispers at the bench, saw Brielle shift uncomfortably in her seat. Rogan's face had lost its confident smirk. I'll allow it, Judge Preston finally announced. Proceed, Mr. Reynolds. The courtroom lights dimmed as Marcus connected his tablet to the display system. The timestamp showed the day of the incident. The camera's view captured Colton's driveway and front door perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus addressed the jury. Please pay close attention to the following footage. The video played in crystal clear quality. It showed Rogan arriving, Brielle greeting him with a kiss that was far from innocent. Then Colton's arrival. Through the front window, the confrontation was clearly visible. The moment of the slap drew gasps from the jury. The sound was muffled through the window, but there was no mistaking what happened. Rogan's hand connecting with Colton's face, the children's visible distress, Brielle's complete lack of intervention. Your Honor, Marcus's voice cut through the silence that followed. I'd like to play footage from previous dates as well. Objection. Brielle's attorney stood. Previous incidents are not relevant to. They establish a pattern of premeditated adultery and deception, Your Honor, Marcus argued, and directly contradict Mrs. Vance's testimony about the nature of Mr. Tate's presence in the home. Overruled. Judge Preston's gaze was hard as he looked at Brielle. Continue. The next series of clips showed a pattern. Rogan's car arriving minutes after Colton left for work, leaving just before he was due home. Brielle checking the street before letting him in. The children being sent to neighbors' houses on days they'd come home early from school. Colton watched Brielle's face as her carefully constructed lies crumbled. She sat rigid in her chair, all pretense of victimhood gone. Beside her, Rogan stared at his bandaged hands, no longer playing up his injuries for sympathy. Your Honor, Marcus said, I move for all charges against my client to be dismissed. The video evidence clearly shows Mr. Vance acted in self-defense after being assaulted in his own home. The jury deliberation lasted less than an hour. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Preston asked the foreman. "We have, Your Honor." The man stood, paper trembling slightly in his hands. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant, Colton Vance, not guilty." The relief that flooded through Colton was immediately tempered by the sight of his children in the back of the courtroom. They'd been brought in for the verdict. Silas, tall and serious, Juniper, small beside him. They'd watched the video too, seen the truth of how their mother had orchestrated everything. "The defendant is free to go," Judge Preston announced. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Tate, remain in the courtroom. We need to discuss potential perjury charges." Colton stood, straightening his tie. Brielle tried to catch his eye, her composure finally cracking, but he looked straight through her. She was a stranger now, someone he'd never really known. "Dad!" Juniper's voice cut through the courtroom chatter. She broke away from her court-appointed guardian, running toward him. Colton caught her, holding her close as Silas approached more slowly. "I'm sorry," Silas said, his voice rough with emotion. "We should have told someone about him coming over." Colton pulled his son into the embrace. "None of this is your fault. Neither of you did anything wrong." Over their heads, he saw Brielle watching, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, her mask was completely gone, revealing the reality of what she'd lost. Beside her, Rogan sat slumped in his chair, his broken hands a permanent reminder of his actions. Marcus approached with a stack of papers. "I've drawn up emergency custody papers. Given the video evidence and the pending perjury charges, we should file immediately." Colton nodded, still holding his children. "Do it." "What happens now?" Silas asked, sounding young despite his attempt to be strong. "Now we go home," Colton said firmly. "Not to the old house. We'll find a new place, make a fresh start. Together." Juniper's voice was small, uncertain. "Together," Colton promised. He looked one last time at Brielle, who had destroyed everything they'd built for a man who now wouldn't even look at her. She'd made her choice, and now she would live with IT. As they walked out of the courtroom, Colton's wedding ring felt lighter somehow. He slipped it off, tucking it into his pocket. A chapter of his life closed forever. Ahead of him, his children walked in the sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows, their shadows stretching toward a future that was theirs to rebuild behind them. The courtroom doors closed on Brielle's sobs. The family court building felt different from the criminal courthouse. Smaller, more intimate, more final. Colton straightened his tie as he waited outside courtroom C. Marcus reviewing their documentation one last time. "The video evidence is crucial," Marcus said, organizing their files. "But the testimony from the children's therapist will seal it." Colton watched other families pass by broken pieces, trying to reassemble themselves into something new. "How are they doing?" "The kids?" Dr. Winter's report is clear. Marcus pulled out a highlighted document. Both children express feeling unsafe around Rogan. They've described a pattern of emotional manipulation from their mother. Silas, especially, has been vocal about the courtroom doors opened, cutting him off. Brielle emerged with her attorney, her designer outfit a stark contrast to her haggard face. The months since the criminal trial had aged her years. "Colton," her voice trembled as she tried to catch his eye. "Please, can we talk?" "No." He didn't even look at her. "They're my children too." Her voice rose, drawing attention from passersby. Now he did look at her, his gaze hard. "You should have thought about that before you let a man assault their father in front of them." "I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Colton's laugh was cold. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is running a red light. What you did? That was a choice. Multiple choices, every single day for months. You don't understand what it was like." Brielle's voice dropped to a whisper. "Rogan promised, don't." Colton cut her off. "I don't care what he promised. I don't care what you thought you'd get from him. You chose him over your family, over our children. Mr. Vance." The bailiff appeared at the doorway. "Judge Wilson is ready." Inside the courtroom, Silas and Juniper sat with their court-appointed guardian, both dressed in their Sunday best. Juniper's hair was braided, Colton's handiwork, practiced over countless YouTube tutorials since they'd moved out. Silas had grown another inch, his suit jacket already too small. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, studied the files before her. This is a petition for full custody of Silas and Juniper Vance, filed by Colton Vance against Brielle Vance. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus stood. Given the events documented in the criminal trial and the subsequent evidence of Mrs. Vance's pattern of behavior, objection. Brielle's attorney interrupted. My client's personal relationships should not impact her right to see her children. Personal relationships? Marcus's voice dripped with disbelief. She exposed these children to domestic violence. She allowed her paramour to assault their father in their presence. She then lied under oath about these events. Mrs. Vance has expressed deep remorse. Enough. Judge Wilson's voice cut through the argument. I've reviewed the criminal trial transcripts, the video evidence, and Dr. Winter's psychological evaluation of the children. She turned to the guardian ad litem. Ms. Peters, what is your recommendation? The guardian stood, her expression grave. Your Honor, based on my interactions with Silas and Juniper, and in consideration of Dr. Winter's evaluation, I recommend full custody be awarded to Mr. Vance, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Vance at her own expense. Brielle's sharp intake of breath echoed through the courtroom. I'd like to hear from the children, Judge Wilson announced. In my chambers, the wait seemed endless. Colton watched the minutes tick by on the courtroom clock, remembering other waits, hospital waiting rooms when each child was born, school offices before parent-teacher conferences, the living room before Brielle came home from her late meetings. When the children returned, Juniper's eyes were red, but she walked taller. Silas's jaw was set in a way that reminded Colton of himself. Judge Wilson returned to her bench. Her expression softened slightly. Having heard all testimony and reviewed all evidence, I'm prepared to make my ruling. The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Vance, please rise. She looked at Colton over her glasses. This court awards you full physical and legal custody of Silas and Juniper Vance. Brielle's sob broke the silence. Mrs. Vance, the judge continued, her voice hardening, you will be granted supervised visitation twice per month at your expense, contingent upon completion of parenting classes and therapy. You will also be responsible for child support payments. The rest of the judge's words faded into background noise as Colton watched his children's reactions. Relief painted across their faces, washing away weeks of uncertainty. 3 months after the custody hearing, Brielle sat alone in her first supervised visitation, waiting. The family center's beige walls and motivational posters seemed to mock her designer outfit. The supervisor, a middle-aged woman named Rita, checked her watch again. They're usually very prompt, Rita said, her tone professional but cool. They're not coming, are they? Brielle's voice cracked before Rita could answer. The door opened. Colton entered with both children. Silas walked straight to the table without looking at his mother. Juniper hesitated in the doorway. Hello, sweetheart. Brielle reached for her daughter's hand. Juniper flinched back. Hi, Mom. Colton remained by the door. 2 hours, he reminded Rita. I'll be back at 8. How? Brielle swallowed hard. How are you both doing in school? Fine, Silas answered, staring at the table. I made the art club, Juniper offered quietly. That's wonderful. Brielle's smile was too bright, too desperate. I always knew you had talent. Remember when we used to draw together? We could. That was before. Juniper cut her off. Before you let him hurt Dad. The silence that followed felt like glass breaking. I never meant. Brielle reached for words that wouldn't come. Rogan wasn't supposed to. To what? Silas finally looked at her, his eyes hard. To hit Dad? To try to take over our family? To make you lie in court? It's complicated, honey. Adult relationships. Stop. Silas stood up. Just stop lying. We saw the videos, Mom. All of them. We saw you checking for Dad's car before letting him in. We saw you sending us to neighbors' houses so you could be alone with him. Tears streaked Brielle's perfect makeup. I made mistakes. Mistakes? Juniper's voice was small but sharp. You chose him. Over and over. You chose him over us. The 2-hour visitation lasted 20 minutes. As her children walked out, Brielle remained at the table, designer purse clutched in trembling hands, Watching her choices collect their price, the foreclosure notice arrived on expensive paper. Ironic considering its contents. Brielle stood in the foyer of the house she'd fought to keep. Reading the bank's polite explanation of how she'd lost everything, her phone buzzed another text from Rogan's lawyer about medical bills. His hands had never fully recovered, ending his surgical career. The man who'd promised her the world now spent his days draining her accounts with medical bills and pain medication. "You said you'd take care of everything." She spoke into her phone, voice tight with desperation. "That was before your husband crippled me." Rogan's voice was slurred, probably from the pills. "Before I lost my practice. Before the medical board suspended my license. I lost everything for you." "No, baby." His laugh was ugly. "You lost everything for yourself. I'm just the excuse you used." The line went dead. Brielle wandered through the empty house. The house she'd claimed in the divorce. The house she'd thought represented her victory. Family photos had been replaced by bare walls. Silas's gaming setup gone. Juniper's art corner, empty. Even the couch where she'd sat with Rogan that fatal day had been repossessed. The doorbell rang. Through the window, she saw her former friends Linda and Marie, or rather, their backs as they hurried away from her porch, leaving a charity food box behind. The same friends who'd once envied her perfect life now left donations and whispered about her at PDA meetings. The social circle that had been her pride now treated her like a cautionary tale. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an email from her employer. Words jumped out: company image, moral clause, and termination effective immediately. She sank to the floor, surrounded by foreclosure notices and unpaid bills. Through the window, she could see her neighbor's house, the same house whose doorbell camera had exposed her lies across town. In a modest but warm 3-bedroom apartment, Colton helped Juniper hang her latest artwork. The piece showed 3 figures, a father and 2 children, surrounded by bright colors. "There's no dark colors in this one," he noticed, adjusting the frame. Juniper smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I don't feel dark anymore." From the kitchen, Silas called out, "Dad, the pasta's bubbling." "Coming." Colton hurried to rescue their dinner, navigating around moving boxes they hadn't yet unpacked. The apartment was smaller than their old house, but somehow it felt more like home. "I saw Mom yesterday," Silas said quietly, stirring the sauce. "At the grocery store. She looked different." Colton measured his response carefully. "How did that make you feel?" "Sad, I guess." Silas added oregano, the way Colton had taught him. "But not like before. More like sad for her." "That's allowed," Colton assured him. "You can feel however you need to feel about it." "She made her choice," Juniper said from the doorway, echoing words she'd heard in therapy. "And we're making ours." The pasta was slightly overcooked, the garlic bread a little too brown, but they ate together at their small kitchen table, talking about their day. Silas's upcoming baseball game, Juniper's art club exhibition, normal family things that had stopped feeling normal for a while, but were finding their rhythm again. "I'm glad we're home, Dad," Silas said suddenly, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through. Colton looked at his children, really looked at them. Silas, growing taller every day, finding his strength. Juniper, her smile returning, her sketchbook filling with bright colors again. They'd been through hell, but they'd come out stronger. "Me too, buddy," he replied. "Me too." Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Colton stood on their small balcony. In the distance, he could see their old neighborhood, where Brielle still lived in their former house, at least until the foreclosure went through. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall, no joy in her suffering. Only a distant acknowledgement that karma had its own schedule. His phone buzzed with a text from Brielle. "Please, can we talk about the kids?" He deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes inside. Juniper's art hung on the walls. Silas's baseball trophies sat on shelves, and school books cluttered the coffee table. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was theirs. They had survived the House of Wolves and come out stronger for it.
Story 4.
One evening, I sat at our table going through my daughter Katie's medical forms. Katie was preparing to start kindergarten, so she had a thorough checkup from the pediatrician. Meanwhile, my wife left her school forms spread out on the table. Glancing lazily at them, I noticed a letter that marked the end of my marriage. In the blood type column, it read A. I froze for about 10 seconds, utterly clueless. I then went to the cabinet and fetched 2 sheets of paper from our medical records. Everything matched my recollection perfectly. Last summer, both my wife and I donated blood to the Red Cross, receiving receipts indicating our blood type. Here they were on 2 sheets of paper. Mine was B, hers was O. So Katie couldn't possibly be my daughter. If my wife was her mother and I witnessed Marie giving birth, then someone with blood type A had to be the father. The kids were already asleep, and Marie was upstairs watching TV. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the backyard contemplating the state of my marriage. I'd say it was okay, pretty average, with its fair share of ups and downs. When we were dating and in the early stages of marriage, Marie and I were deeply in love. We were carnal all the time, sometimes passionately, even outside of the bedroom. We were always touching, holding hands, walking side by side, caressing each other as we passed by. Naturally, over time, that faded. Isn't that how it goes in most marriages? But now, faced with undeniable proof of her infidelity, everything I thought about our marriage was shaken. I pondered, what changed? Was it gradual or sudden? It felt like both. The decline in our closeness was gradual initially. However, about 6 years ago, a few months before Katie was conceived, things took a strange turn. Marie, typically warm and loving, started acting oddly. One evening, she came home from work very late, allowed me a brief tender kiss, then hurried to the shower and avoided me for the rest of the night. The next morning was just as chilly and distant. But that night, she was a different person entirely. She came home early, cooked a special dinner, tucked me into bed early, and made love to me with a fervor and passion I thought we'd lost. We cuddled happily before sleep, and Marie expressed her love for me. Several times that week, we shared passionate moments. Then, the coldness returned abruptly. She arrived late from work, didn't utter a word to me, and swiftly disappeared into the shower. For the next 2 months, I hardly recognized the woman I married. Marie was affectionate and distant, attentive and preoccupied, patient and irritable. I asked her numerous times if something was wrong, if there were issues between us or at work. Her only response was to express uncertainty to Bill, admitting that she might just be feeling a bit nervous and apologizing for it. When things eventually settled after about 3 months, it was far from the joyful beginning of our marriage. Marie became less moody, but she was rarely affectionate anymore, and her interest in closeness vanished. We made love no more than once a week, sometimes even less frequently, and only when I insisted firmly. Any gentle suggestion, like maybe we could be carnal tonight, was met with sharp rejection. I had to seriously address the long lapse since our last carnal moment. Marie would reluctantly engage in lovemaking afterward, making it evident she was merely obliging me. Is this dismal pattern common in all marriages? It was the only marriage I carnally knew, so I couldn't say. Naturally, I pondered what was happening, contemplating the possibility of infidelity. However, soon after, Marie became pregnant, and our shared excitement over our future baby and the joy of having our wonderful Katie overshadowed most of my concerns about our relationship. After Katie's birth, we were constantly exhausted, making Marie's disinterest in lovemaking more understandable, though still unsatisfactory to me. Then, when Katie turned 3, Marie became pregnant again, and we welcomed Brian just after Katie's 4th birthday. So Bill and Marie, once passionate lovers and spouses, transitioned into Bill and Marie, parents of 2 delightful yet exhausting children. We both cherished our kids deeply. Despite my current realization of my profound unhappiness with our marriage and our nearly non-existent lovemaking life, I was oblivious to it at the time. If that was the case, then I concluded that all couples with young children experience this phase. With the startling revelation that my daughter wasn't biologically mine, the events of 6 years ago no longer seemed mysterious. Marie must have initiated an affair around that time. This explained her distant behavior and sudden rush to the shower. The subsequent passionate lovemaking and warmth could be attributed to guilt, or perhaps, if I were being generous, to her attempt to maintain the facade of a happy marriage while continuing the affair. As I sat in the yard, observing the night descend and the stars twinkle, my initial shock gave way to growing anger. Not only had my beloved wife betrayed me, but she had also deceived me into raising someone else's child. and perhaps more than one. If I were solely focused on punishing Marie at that moment, I would have stormed into the house, presented her with the evidence of blood types, coerced a confession, and cast her out onto the street. But it wasn't that simple. I cherished my children, regardless of their biological origins. If we were to divorce, Marie would likely gain sole custody once the truth about their parentage surfaced. I contemplated and asked myself, what do I truly desire? The answers became surprisingly clear. Firstly, I needed to uncover the truth about Marie's actions. Was it a fleeting affair? Was she unaware that Katie wasn't my biological child? Or did she know everything and carry on a clandestine relationship for years? Secondly, I was determined to raise my children as my own and shield them from the knowledge of my non-biological relationship to them. Once I delineated my objectives, devising a plan to achieve them seemed remarkably straightforward. I returned to the house and discreetly collected cotton swabs from each of the children's cheeks while they slept, labeling Katie's with a 2 and Brian's with a 3. Then I headed to the kitchen, swabbed my own cheek, and marked it with a 1. I had a friend who worked in a university chemistry lab, and I arranged for him to conduct DNA tests for me. This marked the initial step, the commencement of gathering crucial information. After receiving my initial response, I knew what to do next. A week later, my friend called me without knowing where the samples came from. I told him about meeting people with the same surname, leading to discussions about potential distant kinship. He then mentioned that Bill's 2 and 3 were siblings, but the first one wasn't related. This revelation indicated that they weren't cousins as previously assumed. I thanked him for the information and ended the call. Katie and Brian were siblings, sharing the same parents. Marie, on the other hand, had 2 children with an unknown partner. Did she have knowledge of this? She must have been aware of her relations with this individual, but was she cognizant of his paternity over our children? There was a straightforward means to ascertain the truth. Approaching Marie as she washed dishes in the kitchen, I brought up the topic without turning towards her. I began by telling her I had a question, and she encouraged me to continue. I explained the situation regarding my colleague's biologist friend needing DNA samples from relatives. I suggested that we obtain swabs from her, me, and each child, planning to handle the kids before bedtime and take care of ours later. I checked Marie's reaction closely as I spoke. In the middle of my explanation, she tensed, almost dropping a pan before composing herself. After I finished, there was a minute of silence before she turned to face me. Marie expressed her doubts about the idea, questioning how we could be certain about what the biologist would do with the samples or if our privacy would be respected. Despite my attempts to argue, she firmly opposed the idea, insisting that she wasn't interested. She asked me to inform my colleague that we declined to participate. I replied softly, saying it was okay either way. Her reaction conveyed to me what I needed to know. My next step involved uncovering the truth about her affairs. Who, where, when, and perhaps why. Although uncertain, searching her home might yield clues. I required time for a thorough search. On Saturday, we planned to visit her parents. Minutes before departure, I pretended a work crisis, feigned a call, then explained the situation to Marie. She reluctantly agreed, departing with the children. Now, I had hours to comb through the house systematically. I deemed my usual haunts unnecessary to search, focusing instead on Marie's spaces. Skipping the kitchen, bookshelves, and living room, I ignored my own areas but meticulously combed through her closet and dresser. The discovery of hidden lingerie hinted at secrets. Only the children's rooms and the attic remained to explore. Concluding that the children's rooms were less promising, I ventured into the attic. Inside, I found assorted old furniture, a few lamps, and numerous boxes of items predating our marriage. Realizing the enormity of the task, I scrutinized the area. Notably, one of the 3 nearby boxes appeared less dusty and had been recently disturbed. Upon closer inspection, I focused on these 3 boxes and uncovered Marie's old belongings, mostly letters from her college days. Among them were letters and keepsakes from myself, including sweet greeting cards. Buried at the bottom of one box, concealed beneath old papers, lay a thin stack of recent notes and 2 unmarked videotapes. Extracting them, I discovered the tapes contained explicit content, while the notes were from Harry, her office superior, expressing overtly closeness sentiments. After scrutinizing the materials for 20 minutes, it became evident that Marie had betrayed me with Harry, beginning around 3 months before our daughter Katie was conceived, coinciding with Marie's peculiar behavior at home. The notes revealed a dynamic characterized by Harry's dominance and Marie's compliance, devoid of affection. They dictated her attire for various occasions and detailed their carnal encounters during late work hours. Some even ridiculed me for unknowingly raising their children. It was apparent Harry had no intention of acknowledging their paternity. My anger intensified as I realized the extent of Marie's deception, knowing Harry was happily married to Caroline, unaware of his affair. Although Marie seemed to willingly participate, there was no indication of coercion. She appeared to relish her submissive role. They both appeared to know the paternity of Marie's children and seemed to enjoy their secret over me. These revelations confirmed Marie's deceit over the past 6 years, deliberately conceiving children from another man while masquerading as my devoted wife. Filled with rage, I resolved to seek revenge on both Marie and Harry. After a brief moment of contemplation, I brought the tapes to the VCR and watched footage of Harry and Marie engaging in carnal acts. The setting of the earlier recording, likely Harry's house, and the more recent one in our bedroom, raised suspicions about Marie's opportunities during my business trips. Overall, the recordings affirmed Harry's closeness dominance over Marie and her eager compliance. The room's lighting wasn't particularly bright, but both figures were clearly visible, and the sound quality was surprisingly clear, allowing me to catch every word and moan on the initial tape. From the outset of their affair, I heard Harry assuming control. Seated on the bed, he directed Marie to perform a provocative strip-tease, which she did with a smile. The closeness was rough, lacking tenderness or affection, and Harry spoke harshly to her. It saddened me to observe that Marie evidently enjoyed the encounter. The second tape featured similar carnal scenes, but included some fresh, intriguing dialogue as they reclined on the bed. Marie queried Harry about his indifference to me raising his children, to which he responded that I was a decent guy who loved children, and he didn't worry beyond that. He mentioned that if it weren't for that, he would advise her to leave me. Marie retorted by questioning what I was good for besides changing diapers. She expressed to Harry that it wasn't fair. Marie defended me, highlighting my kindness and love, comparing them to Harry's treatment. She hinted at being drawn to Harry's roughness because it contrasted with my gentleness. Despite this, they proceeded with their encounter before Harry's departure. Upon completing both viewings, I pondered their arrogance, not only in creating such evidence, but also in foolishly leaving it along with Harry's notes where I could find them. My retaliation would be comprehensive, targeting both of them. I utilized a scanner to digitize each note onto my hard drive. Then, using software borrowed from work for a previous project, I converted each videotape into a digital file on my hard drive for future editing. Once finished, I stashed the records and tapes in the trunk of my car, concealing them under the spare tire. I then meticulously tidied up the attic, ensuring Marie remained oblivious to my presence. Over the following 2 weeks, I methodically executed my plans. It was much easier than I anticipated to feign normalcy with Marie, acting as if nothing unusual had occurred. It struck me that she had deceived me for 6 years, making it easier for me to reciprocate. Despite lacking any desire for her, I continued to act affectionately, even initiating closeness, albeit cautiously, to make it easier for her to refuse. I truly had no desire to touch her ever again. An important event loomed in Marie's life. She had been elected as the new president of the Key Society, a significant charity in our city, and was set to officially assume office at a luncheon where she would deliver a speech outlining the charity's plans for the upcoming year. Marie had served on the Key Society board for 3 years and felt greatly honored to be named president. Nervous about her presentation, she asked for my assistance in preparing the PowerPoint portion she intended to use. This presented me with a golden opportunity. For about a week, I collaborated with her every evening, allowing her to share her slides and other materials with me, organizing them into a cohesive presentation. She rehearsed this several times in the month leading up to her big day, and it always went smoothly. Concurrently, I prepared my own entirely different PowerPoint presentation, ready to replace hers. The night before the luncheon, I deleted Marie's file and substituted it with mine, adding a lock to prevent her from disabling it once the presentation began. All I needed to ensure was that Mary had extended an invitation to Harry and his wife for dinner. I casually inquired, and she confirmed they would attend on that significant evening. I shared Marie's excitement, though for different reasons. Arriving early, Marie, elegantly clad in a black evening gown, looked stunning. I assisted her in setting up the laptop, conducting a couple of tests to ensure smooth playback. We all relished a fine dinner and some initial speeches. Marie was then warmly introduced by the outgoing president, and she approached the podium with a blend of timidity and pride. As applause erupted, she commenced her speech and launched the PowerPoint presentation. Initially, it unfolded as expected, showcasing images of the Society's key charitable endeavors and financial breakdowns. Then, as per my scheme, it abruptly shifted focus. A sequence of still photos followed, frames I extracted from 2 videos depicting a couple engaged in various carnal acts. While some images were dim, the collective impression of a dozen or so unmistakably featured Marie and Harry. For a few minutes, Marie continued addressing key social issues. Then, amid a sudden stir among the audience, she turned to the screen behind her. Gasping, she inadvertently knocked over a glass of water onto the podium, momentarily frozen in shock. Soon, a vivid blush spread across her face and neck as she frantically tried to halt the presentation. By then, still photos had transitioned into brief video clips. Harry's voice rang out as he questioned how they would prevent me from discovering that she was carrying his child. He mentioned that, as long as she allowed me occasional closeness, I wouldn't suspect anything. He added that she should remember that she belonged to him. The room erupted in laughter and jeers from all corners. Marie stood transfixed, utterly dumbfounded, and too stunned to even feel embarrassed. At a nearby table, Caroline, Harry's wife, seized a vase of flowers, smashed it over Harry's head, and exited amidst the commotion. As people gradually vacated the ballroom, they cast glances back at Marie, gesturing and reliving the astonishing spectacle. Surprisingly swiftly, Marie and I were left alone. She stood on the podium, defeated and desolate. Sitting at a table 10 feet away, I grinned broadly as I looked up at her. Eventually, she met my eyes, wearing an expression of profound sorrow. She questioned how I could betray her and stated that she thought I loved her, which struck me as amusing given the circumstances. I burst into laughter and made my exit, denying any remaining love for her. It wasn't like that at all. It was a delightful fantasy, but entirely implausible. I realized that the entire town would soon learn of Harry's paternity, which could jeopardize my custody of the children in the divorce. Additionally, they would resent being labeled as Marie's illegitimate offspring. I acknowledged that I should have been more subtle in my approach. Taking the initiative, I consulted a divorce attorney and collaborated with them multiple times to draft documents for future use. I then created the exact PowerPoint presentation I had described earlier, but instead of waiting for Marie's dinner event, I presented it to her. One evening, 4 weeks prior to the dinner, after putting the children to bed, I summoned Marie and asked her to review the draft of the PowerPoint I had prepared for her upcoming speech the next month. She snapped, questioning if it could wait because she was exhausted that day. Firmly, I asserted that it couldn't wait, reminding her that I needed to review what changes were necessary so I could make them in time. I mentioned that I did all of this for her in my spare time. I then ushered her into the office and seated her in front of the computer. Instructing her to hit the letter A when she was ready, I told her that the file would start on its own, inwardly smiling. I observed her closely. Initially, everything proceeded smoothly as she rehearsed her remarks on the first few slides of the Society's presentation. Then she gasped, her face draining of color as she beheld still images of her and Harry engaged in closeness. Turning to me, mouth agape, she remained silent. I met her gaze impassively. Soon video clips surfaced, featuring conversations about his paternity of her children and her deception of me. As more scenes unfolded, Marie frantically attempted to halt the file, but I thwarted her efforts. Eventually, the screen went dark. This ordeal lasted about 2 minutes. Marie slumped in her chair, head bowed, unable to meet my gaze. After a moment, she finally spoke, lifting her head to look at me. In that instant, she seemed to age 20 years. "Bill, me? Oh, Bill, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. I'm truly sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I retorted coldly. "For what?" "Let's see. For having an affair with Harry Dorner, which apparently spanned our entire 6-year marriage. For bearing him 2 children while leading me to believe they were mine. For mocking me and disrespecting me behind my back. For denying me closeness at Harry's behest. Is that what you want forgiveness for?" Her sobs intensified. "Bill, I don't love him. You're the one I love. The one I've always loved." My anger simmered, restrained. I said nothing, but internally I thought, "No, Marie, that's nonsense. You love our lifestyle. You appreciate how I cater to your needs, care for the children, but you don't love me. No woman who loves her husband would behave so deceitfully." I reclined, allowing her tears to flow. I relished her distress, maintaining silence during the 20 minutes it took for her to cry. Eventually, she sniffled several times, wiped her face, and looked at me. "What will you do, Bill? Are you going to divorce me?" "No, Marie, I won't," I lied. "I care too much about Katie and Brian, even if they aren't biologically mine." I let the words linger before continuing. "But things will change drastically from now on. You can count on that. Let's begin immediately. Call that idiot Harry and tell him to be here in 15 minutes. She stared at me, horror evident on her face. "But I can't do that. He's at home with his wife and kids. He won't come." I grinned. "Say whatever you must, but get him here. Let him know if he doesn't show up within 15 minutes. His marriage will be over by tomorrow." She hesitated, perhaps unsettled by the coldness in my demeanor. Without uttering another word, she headed to the kitchen and dialed her lover. When Harry arrived, he wore the insincere smile I anticipated. Marie must have briefed him on the situation, for he appeared anxious and apprehensive. "Come into the office and take a seat, Harry. And you too, Marie. We have something to discuss," I directed. As we settled, I wasted no time. "Okay, Harry, here's the deal. You've been enjoying yourself with Marie for quite some time, making me out to be a fool. That ends now. Everything has changed, and it's time for you to face the consequences." He began to respond, but I silenced him. "Sit, watch, and listen." I scrolled through the PowerPoint presentation and relished his horrified reaction to its contents. When the presentation ended, a prolonged, unexpected silence ensued. Strangely, I found myself enjoying it more than they did. "Now you'll do exactly as I say without question, or your seemingly blissful marriage to Caroline will abruptly and publicly come to an end. Understand? Don't speak. Just nod," I instructed. He begrudgingly nodded, his expression seething with anger. "Good. Listen carefully and keep quiet. I have several documents for you to sign. I'll give them to you one by one. You may want your lawyer to review them, so I'm giving you 48 hours to return them signed. Otherwise, Caroline will be invited to view a brief video clip. The first document acknowledges that you are the biological father of Katie and Brian, and commits you to pay child support until they turn 21, along with a lump sum for their college education. The amounts are specified here, $10,000 per child per year, plus $100,000 per child upon their first year of college. The funds will be placed in a trust fund, of which I am the sole trustee, with authority to utilize it for the children's needs," I explained. Harry erupted from his chair in fury. "Listen, Bill, this is utterly ridiculous. I have no intention—" I forcefully pushed him back into his seat. "Shut the hell up, Harry. You're wealthy and we both know it. This isn't your show anymore. It's mine and you have no choice. Now keep quiet until I give you permission to speak," I commanded. Across the room, I noticed Marie looking at me with a horrified expression. This was a side of her devoted husband she had never witnessed before. "The second document grants me permission to adopt the children. You and Marie will need to sign it. The third document entails your permanent renouncement of parental rights to Katie and Brian, pledging never to disclose your paternity to anyone. And lastly, a personal admission that you exploited my wife in the workplace, coercing her into an affair," I continued. "What?" Harry exploded once more. "That's a complete fabrication. She wanted it as much as I did." "Sit down, Harry," I commanded sternly. "Perhaps, but Marie will still file exploitation complaint against you. It's one of my conditions for not divorcing her. Do you understand, Marie?" I asked, turning to her. She glanced fearfully between me and Harry, offering no response. "Allow me to clarify," I said to both of them. "I have no immediate plans to act on these documents. Consider them my insurance, Harry. in case you ever contemplate shirking your financial obligations to our children or suddenly decide to reveal their true parentage to others," I added, handing Marie the prepared exploitation complaint. "Sign it, Marie," I instructed firmly. She complied silently, still appearing apprehensive. "Now, Harry, we're nearly finished with your part in today's proceedings. I expect these documents back in my possession within 48 hours. You can deliver them here, and should you entertain any misguided thoughts, such as damaging me, rest assured, copies of your incriminating correspondence with Marie are securely stored, ready to surface if necessary," I concluded, gazing at him disdainfully. "Any questions?" Taking Marie's hand, I guided her back to the office and seated her. I had never witnessed her in such a state before. She trembled with horror. "It's all right, Marie. I would never damage you. There's no need to be afraid," I assured her. "God, Bill, what's gotten into you? How could you do this to Harry?" she exclaimed. I regarded her with some surprise. "You truly don't understand, Marie. Don't you realize that what he did to you, to us, is malicious and unjust?" She blushed. "Yes, of course. It's plain." "Well, you're so furious. It's as if you've lost your mind," she continued. I remained silent for a moment, unsure how to respond. "Marie, I've assured you I won't divorce you. However, our marriage will undoubtedly change drastically. Do you comprehend?" I queried. "Yes, Bill. I'll do whatever it takes to make amends. But what have I done to you?" she pleaded. "All right," I acquiesced. "Let's establish a couple of conditions. Within 2 weeks, you'll secure a new job. I won't permit you to continue seeing Harry daily at work. It should be evident, but you are to have no further personal interaction with Harry. No touching, kissing, lovemaking, phone calls, emails, nothing," I outlined. "Furthermore, if our marriage endures, it will be on a wholly different foundation. I refuse to tolerate your bad temper, coldness, and indifference. I expect you to be a cheerful, kind, and affectionate wife each day. Through your actions, demonstrate your love and appreciation for marrying me, forsaking the wild, uninhibited desirability you shared exclusively with Harry. I anticipate seeing you in the seductive lingerie you've kept hidden in your drawer. I expect you to be eager and willing when it comes to closeness. If you truly love me, Marie, you have a lot of lost time to compensate for," I asserted. She crossed the room and knelt before me, embracing my legs tightly. "I love you, Bill, more than words can express, and I'll prove it to you," she declared tearfully. I observed her pale, tear-streaked face and fearful eyes. Somewhere within me lingered traces of the love and devotion I once felt for this woman with whom I shared so much. However, they were overshadowed, rendered insignificant by my resentment towards her selfishness and hypocrisy. "She deserves whatever consequences come her way," I thought. Softening my tone, I said, "Listen, Marie, in 4 weeks, your significant social dinner will occur. Let's utilize this time to start anew, to potentially improve our marriage. If all goes well, the dinner will be an opportunity to celebrate the success of our renewed efforts. Agreed?" She nodded, tightening her embrace. "Yes, Bill. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll be whatever you want me to be." Drawing her closer, she showered me with kisses, promising to make amends. "Give me 10 minutes to freshen up, and then I'll begin making things right," she pledged, rising with a smile. As she exited the room, I reclined in my chair, amused by Marie's efforts to please me. The next 4 weeks promised to be quite amusing. I was somewhat surprised she failed to notice what I refrained from doing. I refrained from discussing the affair's details or its origins. The entire evening must have been a profound shock for her, leaving no time for reflection. But truthfully, I didn't inquire because I simply didn't care. My relationship with Marie had concluded, though she remained unaware. Upon entering the bedroom a few minutes later, I found the bed neatly made, the lights dimmed, and Marie reclining on her side in a revealing red nightgown after attending to her grooming routine. She looked stunning, as beautiful as ever, yet noticeably nervous. I noticed a bottle of lubricant on the nightstand. In a seductive yet trembling voice, she asked where I was and beckoned me to come to her, extending her arms. I quickly disrobed and embraced her. Our kisses ignited passion. Her body exuded warmth, and she wriggled with anticipation. Whether playful or not, I relished the moment, setting aside my rage and disgust toward Marie to indulge in pleasure with her. Her allure and impatience were exhilarating, particularly after years of indifference. Surrendering to her lead, I lay back as she took charge. Afterward, She extinguished the light and nestled beside me under the blanket. She gently kissed my neck and bid me good night. As I drifted into contented sleep, I anticipated receiving similar attention over the next 4 weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed the subsequent weeks as Marie devoted herself to rebuilding our marriage. The next morning, she woke me with a cheerful smile and a loving kiss, offering pleasure before breakfast. I watched as she went beyond her usual routine to prepare the children for their day. That evening, she prepared an unusual meal from a cookbook, though the kids preferred their usual fare. Marie ensured they bathed and went to bed on time so we could enjoy our evening together. Our nightly closeness was a pleasant change from before. Marie wore another nightgown, and we indulged in leisurely lovemaking. Her enthusiasm, affection, and energy remained consistent. Despite my hidden feelings, I couldn't ignore the semblance of happiness we exuded daily. Marie's loving attention persisted, both in the mornings and behind closed doors. My life seemed like a happy fantasy, albeit with a lack of trust in my wife and simmering rage beneath my facade of contentment. Harry's signed papers arrived promptly, and I quickly obtained Marie's consent for adoption, finalizing the process through a private hearing arranged by my lawyer within 10 days. Then my attorney handled the divorce proceedings. One morning at work, I had a surprise visit from Denise Reynolds, a colleague I collaborate with occasionally. At 28, she was 5 years my junior, and truly stunning. While I knew she was divorced, and her occasional flirty remarks didn't go unnoticed, I never considered her beyond being one of the women I fantasized about. In your dreams, I anticipated Denise's visit to be work-related, but it turned out otherwise. "Bill," she said, "what's different about you lately? You seem, I don't know, younger or fitter or something." "Thanks for the compliment, Denise," I replied with a smile. Then, thinking, why not? I blurted out, "Actually something entirely different, but not suitable for discussion here. Maybe we can grab lunch together today." "Sounds good," she agreed. We headed to the salad bar, then took our lunches to a park table and enjoyed the sunshine. "The change you noticed in me is probably due to my failing marriage," I explained. She looked puzzled. "And that makes you look better? Please explain." I gave her a condensed version of the story. "A couple of weeks ago, I discovered my wife was having an affair with a coworker. It's been going on for a while. I confronted him to leave her alone, and since then, she's been bending over backwards to make it up to me. Here's a secret, Denise. Marie thinks she can win me back, but I've already decided I'll be leaving her in a few weeks. I can't stay with someone who betrayed me. In the meantime, she's treating me like a king, both in and out of the bedroom. That's the change you noticed today," I concluded, and she appraised me with a look. "I'm impressed you're handling it so well," she said. "When I found out my ex was cheating, I nearly fell apart. It took me months to get back on track." "I'm sorry," I offered. "I didn't know you went through that. But I've taken control of my situation now. It'll unfold the way I want, not someone else's way. That's making me feel a lot better." Taking another chance, I added, "One nice thing about my situation is that even though I'm not officially single yet, I know I will be soon. So, I don't have to hold back from expressing my admiration for the lovely lady sitting with me in the park today," I said, smiling at her. She blushed slightly, glanced away, then back at me. "Geez, Bill, you've put me in an awkward spot. I didn't think it was so straightforward," she said. "Sorry, Denise, but you're so beautiful and fun. I've been attracted to you since we met. It's just that until now, it was off limits to talk about it. Any chance you'll join me for dinner on Saturday? I know a charming Italian place with a river view." She looked at me seriously. "Bill, I like you too, and it's always been easy with you. Can I trust you? Is your marriage truly over? Or is this just some ploy to get into my pants? Excuse my skepticism, but I've seen this scenario before." "Denise, I've always been honest with you, and as you know, I've never pushed you before. I'm ending things with Marie in about 2 weeks and filing for divorce the same day. There's no going back. But I understand if you want to distance yourself. I'll just be a little disappointed." She smiled. "No, Bill. Now that you've made the offer, I'm ready to accept it before you change your mind." She gazed at me intently, and after a moment's hesitation, I leaned in, and we shared a light, tender kiss. It wasn't fiery or passionate, but it felt like a beautiful promise. As we parted, I couldn't help but smile, feeling like a joyful child. When I informed my wife about my Saturday night date, it brought out a cruel side in me. I bluntly stated that I would be going out with another woman and expected her to stay home with the kids. Marie was taken aback and on the verge of tears. "Bill," she protested, "but I've been trying so hard. Please think of something to salvage our marriage. How can you see someone else?" "It's quite simple, Marie. Not only did you see someone else, but you also engaged in a 6-year-long affair behind my back. While you've been making an effort lately, and I'm feeling better, it doesn't mean you automatically deserve my unwavering devotion. It's clear that I'll need to seek enjoyment elsewhere for quite some time before we're on equal footing." Her tears began to flow. "Will you sleep with her?" "No, but I could. And that's what you need to comprehend. If it hurts you to think about, well, that's a taste of how you made me feel." With that, I exited the room, ending the conversation. My initial outings with Denise were delightful, yet cautious. We proceeded slowly. Perhaps both of us sensed there was more than just physical attraction between us. We conversed, laughed, commiserated about colleagues, exchanged childhood stories, and simply got to know each other. It felt effortless and natural, at times reminiscent of my early days with Marie. The thought saddened me, but I pushed it aside. Following our third dinner, as I opened Denise's car door outside her apartment, she softly asked if I would like to come in. We both understood the implication, and I felt an instant surge of desire. Once inside, she melted into my embrace, and we kissed and embraced like infatuated teenagers. Pulling back slightly, she confessed to me that she really wanted this, but was quite nervous because it had been a while. She asked me to be gentle and patient. I assured her with a smile, lifting her gently, and asked her which way to her bedroom. Later, I reflected that lovemaking with Denise was incredible but noticeably different from recent encounters with Marie. She started out a bit timid, allowing me to explore and caress her body. Yet, she was so stunning that every moment with her was pure pleasure. Our first carnal encounter was tender, affectionate, and far more loving than the passionate encounters I'd had with Marie. It felt like two people caring for each other, bringing each other happiness. Afterward, Denise kissed me repeatedly and asked if I could stay the night. I gladly agreed, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. The following morning, she seemed a bit bashful again, and while we didn't make love, we bid farewell with genuine tenderness, sharing several tender kisses. With just a few days remaining until my planned wedding night with Marie, I kept my intentions hidden from Denise, but mentioned that my divorce would soon be finalized. When I returned home around 9:30 on Saturday morning, I found Marie quietly weeping at the kitchen table, clearly aware of how I'd spent the previous night. Feigning sympathy more than I genuinely felt, I embraced her tenderly. "I'm sorry, Marie. I understand how you must feel," I murmured. "Oh, Bill, this is just awful. The mere thought of you with another woman tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I have been so oblivious to your feelings?" Looking at me with gratitude, she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance." Marie's significant night, much like mine, was rapidly approaching. To some extent, I almost lamented it. The past 4 weeks with Marie, marked by very satisfying closeness, were enjoyable, and I'll miss them. However, nothing she did even began to diminish my resentment and anger. Her utter betrayal far surpassed any attempts at reconciliation. When I examined my heart, there was only a tiny bit of love for her and a minuscule drop of sympathy for what awaited her. While collaborating on a PowerPoint presentation for her speech, I clandestinely prepared my own rendition, not precisely identical to hers, as I needed to conceal Harry's identity as the children's father. Nonetheless, the general approach mirrored hers, a sequence of photos followed by captivating videos. I rigged the laptop so that Marie's presentation would play whenever she used it. However, by inputting a specific key combination, including a passphrase, I could lock her presentation and substitute it with my unique file. In the days leading up to the event and on the evening itself, Marie anxiously asked if I had deleted the dreadful file she encountered 4 weeks ago. Each time, with a loving smile, I reassured her it was gone and demonstrated that her presentation was intact on the laptop. The last few days at home were particularly sweet. Marie began to feel more assured that she was winning me over again, and her affectionate gestures seemed less desperate, yet more serene. The pain she endured when I spent the entire night with Denise only elevated her further in our bed. Knowing that this charade was about to end, I savored every moment. When the big night arrived, we were there early, with me donning a rented tuxedo and Marie looking glamorous in a black evening dress with spaghetti straps that accentuated her neck and shoulders. We ran her PowerPoint presentation twice to ensure everything was in order. As she leaned over to place her purse under the podium, I swiftly input the key combination, signaling that everything was set and everything unfolded exactly as I anticipated. We enjoyed a pleasant dinner, engaging in friendly chatter with our companions at the table. Then, Marie was warmly introduced by the outgoing president, and she nervously approached the podium amid applause. According to my watch, her joy and anticipation lasted precisely 54 seconds. That's how long it took for the still photos of her infidelity to appear on the screen. Marie didn't freeze or spill her water, but she turned to me with horror and disbelief before futilely attempting to halt the presentation. Naturally, she failed. As the video clips played and the audience reacted with a mix of indignation and laughter, she stood there, flushed and defeated, making no attempt to respond to the vulgar remarks directed at her. Moments later, we were alone. I sat quietly, observing her from across the table. Finally, she uttered the question straight from my fantasy. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "Yes, Marie," I replied. "In these past few weeks, I loved you just as much as you loved me 6 years ago." Approaching the podium, I placed several folded papers in her hand. "I'm filing for divorce. Consider yourself served. If you remain in town, we'll have joint custody of Katie and Brian. Otherwise, I'll fight for full custody, and you know I'll win." Almost at the door, I heard her scream in anguish and fury. "But you promised you wouldn't divorce me. You said we could work things out." Turning back to face her, I responded, "Yes, Marie. So I suppose after all these years of your deceit, I lied to myself.